On that distant planet, the man takes 2 long drags and lets his eyes go somewhere melancholy. Then his door swings open and 2 small heads appear around it. Twin daughters calling out together that daddy is wanted at the table because their big brother says so. He stands, scoops one girl into each arm, and asks how their classes went and whether the teacher handed out any little red flowers. They report that they recited the biodiversity research report in front of the whole class, and were each rewarded with one. He tells them they are good girls. With the common soldiers handled, I go looking for a private shop to equip my 6 Tier 1 beings with F-rank gear, and I try the same trick twice. I open the chat box and explain that my parents died when I was young, that I raised 10 younger sisters alone, and that I have no spare faith points. The reply is 2 words telling me to get lost, followed by a Dodo network prompt informing me that the other party has closed the chat box. That one I earned. I end up spending close to another 200,000 faith points for exactly 6 sets of Tier 1 weapons, and my liquid capital hits the floor again. Everything gets shoved into the Divine Kingdom, and then I stretch, lie down, and sleep early. Tomorrow, I only need to stand out far enough for one of those bosses to open a wallet. Morning. The assessment is not in the virtual world, so the whole senior year assembles physically at Yang County First High School. I walk back through those gates 3 months after the day of awakening. Over 2,000 students make up the senior year, and although most are logistics path and irrelevant here, the rules require them present. The gossip is that Principal Hong Byong will appear in person, a third-order god most of us will never glimpse twice. The exam site, they say, is a divine kingdom he conquered from alien gods in his youth, maintained now as a breeding ground for monster beasts of every rank. Its coordinates published for student assessments. Somebody asks whether an alien's divine kingdom works like ours. The local expert says it does. Only the believers differ, ours being humans and theirs running to monster beasts and undead and demons. He credits his demigod grandfather, who apparently cannot stop talking. I take my spot and look around, because ever since Tier 1 beings appeared in my divine kingdom, my senses have sharpened. Class 7 has the thinnest aura on this field by a wide margin. Lee Suho burning like a furnace while the rest of us flicker beside him like struck matches. Class 1 stands dead center, and even from this distance the pressure coming off them is frightening. Na Bing is in the middle of it, the Na family's genius with a B-rank talent, and I cannot work out how anyone reaches that level in 3 months. The air temperature has not changed, and looking at her back still makes my eyes sting with cold. Her strength is orders of magnitude past mine. With that talent and the full weight of her family behind her, she drives a sports car while I run on foot. I take a breath, lower my eyes, and work on not being noticed. Lee Suho comes over and asks how my preparations went, and I tell him they are all right. Once this assessment ends, he says, his original proposal still stands if I want to change my development path. The prosperity rating impressed him, and he still cannot respect the road I picked. No combat talent, no family money, 3 months of runway, and he cannot see how much a believer base changes in that window. I thank him, because he means no harm by it. A few steps away, Wang Jinwu has gone very quiet, and is breathing carefully through his nose, which is what nerves look like on him. Jiang Pang arrives, throws an arm across my shoulders and tells me to come eat at his house after the exam, since we need to catch up. I tell him we will see, that I have prepared a long time for today, and that I am hoping to pull investment out of the big family. He blows that off and reminds me nobody invests in logistics students, that his believers know how to farm and nothing else. His plan is to push 1,000 believers into the grounds, look around, and yank them straight back the instant anything Tier 1 appears. These things drag on 10 days to half a month, he says, and he is not wasting that much of his life at school. A figure appears in the sky above the platform and comes down slowly. He introduces himself as Yang Monri, the dean, and tells us we face 3 major exams across our senior year. The initial Divine Kingdom War, the midterm class placement exam, and finally the college entrance examination. Today is the first, and he trusts we understand what that means. Before it, he wants to welcome the school's guests, and he snaps his fingers, which brings soft music up from every direction. He names the elder of the Na family, Na Songpeng, then the elder of the Li family, Li Wan, then the president of the Yangju Chamber of Commerce, Mi Chea, the president of the Blacksmith Association, Xiao Mu Zheng, and the owner of Zhengwan Mansion, Man Sam Chen, on down the list at speed. Each name lands and the person appears in a seat on the high platform as though teleported. This is the top institution in the county, and an exam this size drags out every heavyweight in it. I have only seen these faces in the local news. Yang Monri bows to the platform, turns back to us, spreads his arms, and pours it on. We are students of this school and the pride of Yang County, he says, and today's exam is the most important opportunity of our lives. The bosses behind him come from every industry and family in the county, spending their own precious hours watching the process, and outstanding results may convert into corporate investment. We are the glory of First High School, the future of Yang County, and the flowers of the human race. Then he asks us to welcome Principal Hong. A figure simply exists in the highest seat, with no aura fluctuation and no arrival to speak of. The principal is also the deputy county magistrate, backed by the federal government, carrying the strength of a third-order god. I look up and cannot resolve his face no matter how hard I focus. The rules he gives us are simple. No limit on believers, no limit on combat methods, and 10 days total. A Tier 1 monster beast is worth 100 points, a Tier 2 10,000, and a Tier 3 1 million, with the final ranking taken off the scores. Then he adds that the school board will convert exam scores 1 for 1 into faith points deposited into our divine kingdoms. He waves his right hand and rows of nutrient pods filled with green liquid drop into place in front of every student. We are still divine creatures, he says, and going without food this long carries real risk, so the pods stand in for eating. Lie inside, clear your minds, and your consciousness enters his divine kingdom. The exam site is an alien divine kingdom spanning over 100 million square kilometers, which nobody could finish exploring in 10 years inside. Out here, 10 days without water or food would kill even a divine creature. The nutrient pods came out of a mechanical civilization divine kingdom, built to mass-produce ordinary believers, and nobody who designed them imagined feeding gods in training through a school exam. Operating one takes no skill at all, just open the door and lie down. Despite the green liquid closing over my face, breathing is not affected in the slightest. I clear my mind and my consciousness surfaces in open ground. I reach down at a reflex to touch the earth and my right hand goes straight through it. Pure consciousness projection then, with a live link to my own divine kingdom and no restriction on deploying resources or believers here. Publishing a divine kingdom's coordinates is what lets other gods walk in and out freely. So I reach through the link and summon the Xingyi army, the Chongryong army, the Beiko army, the Jujak army, and the Hyunmu army. 50,000 men bow as one and greet their god. I tell them this is the field where we fight the alien races. Divide into 5 routes, advance in a fan, and kill every monster beast you meet. They accept the divine oracle without a murmur. On the open market, a Tier 1 monster beast is worth less than 10 faith points, and this assessment pays 100 ahead. High score in front of the great families and a mountain of faith points out of the same 10 days, so naturally I intend to grind until my hands bleed. I cannot feel a single outsider's attention on my divine kingdom, so I open the evolution talent all the way. War costs bodies, and with it running, my divine kingdom supplies soldiers and food faster than any battle can eat them. None of us inside know that a vast sky screen has unfolded over Yang County First High School, carrying every student's performance in full view of the platform. The first thing it shows is the Ney family girl, who has already produced a Tier 3 life form, and the crowd agrees. First place is hers before the exam properly begins. Na Bing has 100,000 soldiers on the field. Her leading general holds a white spear and radiates a full Tier 3 aura, with nearly 20 Tier 2 beings behind him and 1,000 Tier 1 beings behind them. Everyone is armored in bright silver white that stretches as far as the screen can show. That is not a lead. That is a different exam. Michea congratulates Elder Na and says she did not expect the Na family to produce a genius like this in the current generation. Give her a century, she adds, and Na Bing will very likely break through into godhood. Na Xiongpeng answers with a professional smile and thanks President Mi for her kind words. Someone notes that the Li family's Li Chonhang is also excellent. No Tier 3 being has appeared among his believers, but his talent is said to be Mad Blood, instantly raising their combat power by 50%. In the whole senior year, they agree, only Na Bing beats him reliably. Another name comes up, a Li Peng committing to the mechanical stream, and the platform decides the school is unusually deep this year. Man Samchun of Jungwon Mansion chuckles that he will not waste his dreams on Class 1, and only hopes the ordinary classes throw up a decent sprout. Cheol Mujung asks how much weight the contracts he is prepared to actually carry. Man Samchun answers that he can afford the price for any student with real ability. Somebody calls that a grand gesture. He spreads his hands and explains it cannot be helped, since an accident during land reclamation last year killed 12 demigod executives under mysterious circumstances. His middle management is badly thinned, and if he does not start training replacements now, the succession gap will open under him. Down on the playground, less than an hour into the assessment, the first students are already popping their nutrient pods and climbing out. Inside half a day, 50% of the senior year has quit. For a logistics student, this exam is a formality with a nap attached. The ones who finish do not go home either, standing around staring up at the sky screen for a free look at how far our friend's divine kingdom has come. Zhang Peng rubs his eyes hard enough to hurt and takes another 10,000 points of critical damage to the heart. He wants to know what is going on with Godfather, why there are so many believers, and why every last one is carrying a weapon. Godfather is supposed to be a man who raises Bodhi treasure snakes, Around him, people are asking who that Class 7 kid is, since his score is nearly squeezing into the top 100. Only a few hours have passed out there while several months burned inside. The leaderboard in the center of the playground reads, Na Bing first with 1,630,000 points, and Lee Chonhang second with 420,000. Lee Suho sits 99th with 180,000, and I sit 105th with 140,000. None of those numbers mean what they look like they mean. The Divine Kingdom hosting this exam is so absurdly large that most believers spend their time walking rather than fighting, and Class 1 students are currently sitting past 800th place. The crowd sorts it out anyway. Somebody remembers that I caused a stir at Awakening. An F-rank resource talent bolted to a Divine Kingdom of 1,000,000 square kilometers. Somebody else remembers my 6 Tier 1 beings, which is Class 1 development by any measure, even if my believer's strength is still thin. Then they move on to Lee Suho, 300 Tier 1 beings and still in Class 7. A better informed voice explains that he awakened a C-rank talent, got reclaimed by the Lee family, and moves up the moment the placement exam ends. On the high platform, my climb toward 100th place is drawing eyes. Man Samchan says the boy is not bad, that Class 7 means no background at all, and that developing believers this far in 3 months is not easy. Chio Mujung adds that my array is remarkably proficient, since after killing that many beasts, I have fewer than 100 wounded and not one dead. Man Samchan asks whether Chio Mujung answers, and they will see whose terms are higher when the time comes. Nearly 100 demon wolves wrapped in green flame come down off a mountaintop at my center column. I raise a hand and give the orders. Center army shield bearers hold the line. Left and right spearmen outflank. Archers in the rear prepare. A Tier 1 monster beast's skull is harder than good iron, and that first wave shatters shields outright. Dozens of my believers behind them lose their throats or their chests in a breath. My expression does not change, because under the evolution talent, the dead are replaceable before the blood dries. What actually hurts is the equipment. 50,000 sets of ordinary iron weapons is a hard ceiling, and everyone I lose is simply gone. Understanding how fast this stuff gets consumed would have made me buy spares while the merchant still felt sorry for me. First Divine Kingdom War, no elder standing behind me to point out the obvious, and the gaps in my planning will keep showing up like this. 100 wolves against 10,000 men is arithmetic though. Past that opening wave, the pack is surrounded by a force 100 times its size and hacked apart where it stands. I look toward the interior and decide the beast density out here is too thin to bother with. The exam runs 10 days, and grinding the rim would waste all of them. I send down an oracle bringing the other 4 armies tight around the Singye army, closing the gaps to 20 ri, and push forward. Outside, the leaderboard has me at 172nd with 3,640,000 points. This Divine Kingdom belongs to a third-order god, so my march has been cautious. And in 5 internal years, I have met nothing above Tier 1, and no pack larger than 300 wolves. Caution costs rank, and other students have walked past me on the board. If I could see that number, I would be unhappy about it. My best friend, meanwhile, is having the time of his life. Jiang Peng stands under the sky screen shoveling food out of a lunchbox, telling anyone nearby that his brother is unbelievably fierce. He has not left the school grounds this entire time, ordering takeout when hunger strikes, terrified of not being the first face I see when my pod opens. 3 months since awakening and my believers already fight like that, which in his math makes a future demigod certain. He has decided it does not matter whose subordinate god he becomes, since either way he grows grain for me, and brothers cannot squeeze each other's prices too hard. Prodigies like Na Bing and Li Cheon-hang have already blown past 50 million points and moved on to hunting Tier 2 beasts. The bosses on the platform are not watching them. They came to recruit for their own companies, and a great family prodigy was never going to be available at any price they could name. Man Samchan, still watching me, announces that this little fellow is in trouble. I have walked into a pack of monitor lizard rabbits nearly 3,000 Tier 1 beasts strong, and my army is about to bleed. Chio Mujung says my luck is poor, that those 50,000 believers must be the backbone of my Divine Kingdom, and that without reinforcement I will not be qualified to go deeper. Inside, my view fills with giant rabbits standing twice the height of a man, and I give the order immediately. Set defenses, and the Chongryong and Beiko armies close at full speed. The 2 Tier 1 beings of the Singye army take the eye of the array, and every soldier presses shoulder to shoulder, weapons up, feet planted. 3,000 Tier 1 monster beasts is the hardest thing this army has ever been asked to hold. Dust rolls up as those enormous bodies slam into the shield line, front claws coming down at my soldiers' heads. Hundreds of my believers lose their skulls in the first exchange and drop into the mud they made. The generals work the line without a wasted breath. First row retreat, second row vanguard squad forward. Archers suppress. The left wing is told to hold for its general and warned that any man who takes a step back will be executed without mercy. The whole formation answers that they fight for their god and will die where they stand, rather than give ground. With the array carrying them, 10,000 mortals blunt that first wave and pay only a few hundred lives for it. All of that projects cleanly to the world outside. Man Samshen's eyes narrow with surprise and something like doubt, because the array on that screen already carries a trace of divine spirit. The boy has taken it to minor mastery, and that is not right. He is not the only one who notices, and the elders of the Na family and the Li family both sit forward. Na Xiongpeng strokes his beard and observes that it has been 3 months since the awakening, and taking an F-rank array that far in 3 months is not easy to explain. Formation is the single greatest lever in a divine kingdom war, and when high-ranking gods fight, they may put billions of believers into one enormous array. Arrays are harder than cultivation techniques, and harder than martial skills, and nobody else in the entire third year has taken this one to minor mastery. Li Wan taps the arm of his seat and asks teacher Li Chongyang whether that student belongs to her class. She is no less shocked than anyone else on that platform, and she does not let a flicker of it reach her face. Yang Biome is indeed a promising seed, she says, and it is entirely within reason that he would comprehend the array to minor mastery. Seeing that nobody is satisfied, she explains further. 2 months ago, she organized a prosperity rating assessment for her class, and my result came back at 22.4. She points out that I come from an ordinary family, and that my largest source of funding was a 5 million faith point loan from the federal fund. Understanding arrives around the platform at once, and somebody says the words out loud. The actuary talent. Of course, they agree, since actuaries are generally people with transcendent comprehension. The boy must have grasped the array through his own effort and taught it down to his believers. A strange light moves through Na Songpeng's eyes. With comprehension like that plus the actuary talent, an invested student has a real chance of reaching low-rank godhood. Even for houses like the Na family and the Li family, a god is a pillar rather than a decoration. Everyone else on the platform reads the faces of Li Wan and Na Songpeng and quietly deflates. Man Samchun liked me before this and now likes me far too much to have a chance. With 2 great families moving in, Zhongwan Mansion is not getting a seat at that table, and he tells himself he will fight for me anyway. Li Cheng-yung lets the corner of her mouth curl. She admits privately that she misjudged me, that my divine kingdom talent is average, and that she never expected the comprehension behind it. I am busy closing an encirclement and have no idea that half the county's wealth just started bidding on me. Standing over a field carpeted in beast corpses, all I can think is that these faith points are far too easy to earn. The Cheongri army and the Beiko army seal the ring and finish the pack at a cost of 500 soldiers. 3,000 Tier 1 monster beasts converts to another 300,000 faith points once the assessment closes. The losses barely register, since training runs around the clock, and one thought pulls another 500 adult males into the ranks. I issue the oracle to converge all 5 armies and push deeper. With 50,000 men in one place, I would have erased that pack without breaking formation. Deeper in the beasts get stronger and denser, which makes wide area searching pointless, and half the assessment window is already gone. This place really does deserve to be a god's conquest. The entire third year of a 2,000 student school is loose inside it, and I have not crossed paths with a single other human being. My army fights over 100 engagements against packs of every size. The worst is 8,000 Gale Wolves under a Tier 2 Gale Wolf King, which costs me nearly 15,000 believers and kills a Tier 1 general. I went numb to this long ago. They are my believers, and I have watched them breed generation after generation from above. And somewhere in there, I stopped seeing them as people like me. A merciful God cannot walk the war divine kingdom path, and anyone who cannot stomach the deaths should go grow rice like Jiang Peng. Tenfold acceleration keeps the reinforcements flowing even through losses like these, and my overall strength never drops far. 3 more days pass outside. Inside, my 50,000 are down to 20,000, everyone wounded and exhausted. The heartland is where the exam stops being generous. The beasts stronger, the packs growing geometrically, most led by 2 or 3 Tier 2 monster beasts. Against a gap in base strength that wide even the array cannot keep casualties down, and my divine kingdom stops backfilling losses fast enough. So I halt the advance and pull my troops 1,000 ride back out. Pushing deeper would only burn believers until I was forced to quit early. Better to find thinner ground and hunt it steadily, since points are points and a dead army earns none. The rest goes fast, and then Principal Hong Byung's voice reaches every student still fighting. The assessment is over, he says. Come out. A repulsive force takes hold. My remaining 20 to 30,000 believers snap back into my divine kingdom, and my consciousness lands in my body at once. The board reads not being first with 434 million points, and Lee Chonhang second with 97 million. Lee Suho is 43rd with 45 million. I am 64th with 38 million. Wang Jinwoo comes in 463rd with 2,070,000. I climb out of the nutrient pod and stare at that board with an expression I am not fully controlling. 64th is past anything I planned for, which tells me the great family's children are not the monsters I had built in my head. As expected of an SSS-Rank talent, breaking the top 100 puts a student among the best even by Class 1 standards. I can also feel the weight of attention on me, my classmates on one side and half the high platform on the other, all of them measuring. Man Samchen takes a deep breath and says the boy is not bad. He had not expected this divine kingdom to have that kind of foundation, and adding it up, the troops deployed across the assessment must have exceeded 200,000. Working backward, someone estimates my total population at 500,000 to 1 million. For a god that is nothing, and for a divine kingdom 3 months old it is eye-catching. His tactical arrangements were still poor, another voice notes, since deploying all 200,000 from the start would have carried him 2,000 kilometers further in. He is a young man in his first divine kingdom war, someone answers. And it is normal not to stake everything on one throw. Man Samchen says that with this comprehension and development speed, joining Jungwon Mansion earns me a vice president's chair the day I reach godhood. The platform keeps up the casual chatter, and every few sentences their eyes drift toward Li Wan and Na Songpong. Beside the Na family and the Li family, the companies these people represent are simply outclassed. Every year, the two great families skim the students with the most potential, and everyone else divides the leftovers. Li Wan says plainly that his Li family will fight for the boy Yang Beom. Na Songpong echoes it and adds that they will see who brings the better offer. Recruitment is not a forced sale, since under federal law, even powers on that level must win a genius over what the contract he wants to sign. Out of all of Class 7, only Lee Suho and I made the top 100 of the grade. Watching my 38 million land on that board, he takes a shock to the chest he does not show. He knows better than anyone what his own number cost. To force his believers upward, he ran the bakery on blood pool at full tilt, producing blood pellets, and he sold none of them, feeding everyone back to his own people. In a handful of months, his 50 million genius loan is nearly gone, and only that torrent bought him his place. And what resources did I have? The answer to that question rearranges how Lee Suho sees me. Handed his conditions, he suspects I would be sitting in the top 30. He also understands that his own Lee family will invest in me, which means the classmate he once meant to develop into a subordinate god is about to stand level with him. He is not jealous. We shared a classroom for 3 years and became brothers somewhere in the middle of that, and a friend who grows stronger is either an asset later or a business partner today. Jang Pang gets to me first. He wants to know whether I have any idea how he spent these 10 days. Waiting and finally waiting me out. Then he demands to know why I never mentioned being good enough for the top 100 of the grade. From now on, he is following me, he says, and I had better not dare look down on him. Then he wraps me in a hug and wails loudly enough to turn half the class around. Everyone knows we have been best friends since first year, and plenty are watching him with envy. If you get rich, do not forget your friends, and if you cannot lean on your father, you lean on your brothers, and calling one of them godfather is a perfectly reasonable investment strategy. Hong Byung stands and his voice arrives inside every skull on the field at once. The grand competition has ended, the faith point rewards are being deposited into our divine kingdoms, and anyone wishing to invest should go to the virtual world and contact students individually. Then he is simply gone, the way he arrived. As a third-order god, his standard sits somewhere none of us can see. It is not only students like me who fail to register on him, since even a daughter of heaven like Na Bing does not catch his eye. Every big figure on the platform stands and bows to empty air. Lee Suho reminds me to get home and into the virtual world quickly, since he expects a queue of important people wanting to recruit me. I nod and tell Jang Pang I am heading back first. Important matters come first, he says, and I should come eat at his place once I am done. He nods fast, because this is family investment, the shortcut that lets an ordinary person leap the dragon gate, and he would not dare slow me down. Outside the gate, I tap my wristwatch, spend 400 faith points on a fast car, and reach Myeongwol community in under 10 minutes. Upstairs, helmet on, into the virtual world, and the invitations are stacked up waiting. The first comes from a lawyer for the Ma family, whose family head watched my performance and wishes to sign an investment contract. He gives virtual world coordinates at 133, 175, 2068, and hopes we can meet in detail. The Ma family, I think, the second-hand grain merchant. They are nowhere near the Na family or the Lee family, and they still control over 50% of the grain trading channels in Yang County. I tap the coordinates and my consciousness lands in an antique-style tea house. The man waiting introduces himself as Jang Sam. A lawyer for the Ma family says he is honored I came, and lays a stack of documents in front of me. On signing, his clients immediately provide 50 C-rank buildings valued within 500,000, plus a monthly subsidy of 300,000 faith points, all of it running until I graduate university. In return, once I become a demigod, I must join them and work for them. If I reach godhood, they will retain me as a guest elder, drawing dividends from their companies with no specific duties attached. He walks me through the key clauses while I read, and adds that the federal government requires the signing ceremony be held in the virtual world. Everything outside the terms he named is standard template, with no room to cheat me. I nod and ask whether I can think it over. Of course, he says, that is my right as a student, and a very small disappointment crosses his mouth and vanishes. A student with my results will have many houses bidding his clients are barely in the running, and they only sent an invitation hoping for a bargain. In this business, asking for time to consider is the polite form of no. I tap the next coordinate and vanish out of his tea house. Another figure appears in the room behind me, and Jang Sam begins again. He tells student Wang Jinwoo that he is a lawyer for the Ma family, and that although those results are average, his clients would nonetheless like to talk. I work through the invitations in order and meet 6 groups. The strongest so far comes from a lawyer for the Yangju Chamber of Commerce. He puts up 50 million faith points in initial investment, a monthly subsidy of 1 million, and a B-rank spirit plant on top. It tempts me, and agreeing before I have seen every bidder would still be poor arithmetic. The next is Jungwon Mansion, whose lawyer says his boss is extremely optimistic about my potential. He offers 50 million initial, 1.5 million monthly, and a personal promise of 5% equity plus the vice president's post the moment I break through to First Order God. I tell him I will consider it carefully, return his bow, and tap the last 2 invitations. The Lee family and the Na family, the 2 strongest houses in Yang County. The Lee family lawyer congratulates me and says Elder Lee Wan believes I may even become a god, so they are prepared to offer me the treatment of a Tier 2 genius. That means a monthly subsidy of 2 million faith points and an annual dividend of 10 million from the Lee Family Genius Fund, both running until I graduate university. On signing, an immediate short-term investment of 100 million. He smiles the entire time, with a thin arrogance behind his eyes that says he does not care whether I refuse. I ask carefully whether I may answer later. Of course, he says, since federal regulations give a student 1 day to choose, after which the template in my hand disappears. The last coordinate puts my consciousness down in a living room, which is not what I expected. Why does a Na family investment negotiation look like somebody's private residence? A woman's voice comes from behind me, as clear and melodious as a lark, asking whether I am Yang Biom. I turn fast and find a face that is withered. Her voice is young and her eyes are clear, and her skin is cracked in patches like an old woman at the end of her span. I bow and tell the young lady that I am indeed Young Bohm. She looks me over from top to bottom, says nothing at all, and turns and goes upstairs. Standing there alone, I wonder whether this is genuinely how the Ney family discusses investment and where my contract is supposed to be. Then a familiar figure comes downstairs and I am saluting before I finish recognizing him. It is the Na family elder from the high platform, Na Sung Pung. A true god has just requested a private meeting with me, so being careless here is not on the menu. Investment contracts are handled by family lawyers, which makes an elder appearing in person a question rather than a compliment. I know that performing well and catching a few eyes does not make me worth a god's afternoon. He calls me Little Yang and asks whether that is acceptable, wearing a kind expression the whole time. I tell him he may do as he wishes and try not to look as off balance as I feel. He snaps his fingers, 3 documents settle in front of me, and he invites me to read all of them. The first sits close to the Lee family's terms with fewer strings. I would only register my name with the Na family and sell my Divine Kingdom's produce to them at market price as a matter of priority. That is the best contract I have seen today, and barring surprises, the one I would sign. Puzzled about why there are 2 more, I pick up the second. A moment later I look up at him and hear myself asking whether this one is written correctly. The terms are not real. A monthly subsidy of 5 million faith points, and a year-end bonus of 30 million out of the Na Family Talent Fund, an immediate initial investment of 100 million on signing, with a B-rank building thrown in on top. It feels less like an investment than like being groomed as a direct descendant of the house. He asks whether I want to sign the second contract, and I tell him seriously that I do. A B-rank building starts at over 500 million in value, and at my current status I do not even hold the authorization to purchase one. The first contract, he explains, is what the Na family offers under normal conditions, and the second is what he offers under his own arrangement. If I want the second, I must sign the third supplementary agreement, and he points at the last document. I take a breath, give him a look I do not entirely manage to hide, and open it. The words post-nuptial agreement sit at the top of the page. My brain goes offline for a full second while I consider the possibility that my destiny is to be a kept man living off a rich woman. Na Seongpung sighs and tells me the person I just met is his granddaughter, Na Yu, only 2 years older than I am. Last year, an alien demigod ambushed her during a training assessment at university, and her divine kingdom is now saturated with poisonous miasma. She does not have long. I ask whether even someone of his status cannot heal her. There is no way, he says, and then corrects himself, because the truth is the cost exceeds what he can personally bear. Na Yu's talent is not her cousin Na Bing's talent, so the family will not spend that kind of money on her. I ask whether that makes Miss Na Yu my marriage partner. That is right, he says. Her parents also died in a divine kingdom war against the alien race, so the two of them have been leaning on each other ever since. Now, before her divine kingdom finishes collapsing, the girl would like to have a child. I point at my own nose and ask why me. My divine kingdom talent is poor, he tells me evenly, and my comprehension is excellent, and with this investment behind me I have a real chance of becoming a true god. That makes me a good father to give a future child. Since his granddaughter's divine kingdom was ruined, every promising young man who used to circle her has drifted away. He has been reduced to hunting for boys with good talent and low status, who might marry into the family. And I fit exactly. I read the third agreement carefully, watching for the trap, and finish it inside a quarter of an hour. Despite the name, it does not regulate married life at all, and reads instead like a property division agreement. It has almost nothing to do with the girl herself, and everything to do with dividing property between our future child and me, the father. There are only two real points. The first is that the child must carry the surname Na, with an annotation added explaining that only this way can the child join the Na family and draw on its resources and training. The second is that upon Na Yu's death, 2/3 of the inheritance in her divine kingdom passes to the child and the remaining third transfers to me. The restrictions on my side are essentially non-existent, the only requirement being that a child arrive within 5 years. The agreement even attaches a thoughtful supplement noting that if the male party has fertility problems, the two of us may pair up through genetic engineering. Having read the whole thing twice, my conclusion is that refusing would be an offense against heaven itself. So I take a breath and tell him slowly that I do not seem to have any reason to refuse. Good, he says. He will arrange for a moving company to relocate my parents to the Yang City Villa district shortly. From now on, Yuya lives with all of us, and I am not to let her be wronged. I interrupt to ask whether I may meet Miss Na Yu alone before that. Of course, he answers. Since she has not left the virtual world and is upstairs right now, I should keep both contracts, which take effect the moment I sign my name. He tells us young people to talk, says this old man has business elsewhere, and exits the virtual world on the spot. In the era of divine kingdoms, resources buy everything. Forget a divine creature like me. With a sufficient dowry, a man can marry a god and bring her home. This is a contract marriage and nothing more. And a benefit this size is not an opportunity anyone lets walk out the door. Upstairs, Na Yu sits in front of a mirror putting on makeup, powder laid thick enough that her complexion looks almost healthy. With her back still to me, she asks whether I have finished talking with her grandfather. It is settled, I tell her, and I can sign whenever she likes. She turns and asks whether she should be calling me husband now. My face goes warm and I tell her we are both young and there is no need for that. This is not a night at the heavenly fragrance world. The moment I sign, we enter a marriage relationship codified by federal law and a community of interest that outranks our own parents. Before today, I had never once thought about marriage, and the other party is offering too much to think about anything else. Being a kept man does not sound flattering. When it drops into your lap, though, only a fool refuses to thank his luck. I cough and ask whether I may call her Yuya, since she is already my wife and Miss Na sounds like something you say across a desk. Whatever I like, she says, and the faintest smile touches the corner of her mouth. Beside the sons of great families, my clumsy manner apparently amuses her. She tells me not to be nervous. With the talent I displayed, she says, if I had been born into the Na family as she was, my achievements would already stand higher than hers ever did. Given her current situation, she calls herself the unworthy one. I wave both hands and tell her I am 10,000% willing to marry into her family. Is she joking? She is a god's descendant, and the dowry attached to her saves me 10 years of walking in circles. My wife's divine kingdom is ruined, and her face is worn thin, and none of that changes anything with the lights off. The dowry changes everything, and one signature carries me from poor peasant to comfortable. Unworthy is not the word for this. Watching me fumble through the answer, her eyes fill with amusement and grief braided together. She gives me the coordinate of her divine kingdom and tells me to come in, since we have confirmed our relationship. I tap it, and an invisible force pulls my consciousness through. Two milky white phantoms hang 10,000 meters up, our projections side by side, and she opens the permissions so I can see everything. The divine kingdom covers 800,000 square kilometers. Apart from 2,000 or 3,000 elderly, weak, sick, and crippled mortals huddled at the exact center, there is no sign of life in it. Forests, mountains, rivers, and the air 10,000 meters up are all saturated with emerald green gas. My expression goes hard, because I can feel what that gas is. A single trace of it inside my own divine kingdom would be a catastrophe I could not recover from. She tells me it is the poison of an alien demigod, the Death Spider Emperor, small in quantity and extraordinarily high in quality. Left to the divine kingdom's own metabolism, it would need at least 50 real-world years to clear. She will struggle to last 5. I ask whether university is really that dangerous. There are always people with bad luck, she says. It was supposed to be an ordinary assessment, and they simply happened to walk into an alien demigod hunting the geniuses of our race. The team leader arrived in time, and without him she would never have made it home. I ask whether there is truly no treatment, frowning, because I have started to like this woman. We have known each other an afternoon, and she has hidden nothing, which is its own kind of sincerity. Of course there is treatment, she says. The price is the problem. It requires a high-level healing god at a cost of at least 100 divinity points, and she is not personally worth that much. Sorrow crosses her face and moves on. Everyone wants to live. A great house does not continue on sentiment. Whoever has better talent deserves more resources, and fairness and transparency are the cornerstones that keep a family standing for centuries. Since she suspended her studies, only her grandfather has spoken up for her. The elders she grew up around and the childhood friends she once had all drew a line and stepped back from it. There is no clearer demonstration of how cold the world runs. I ask what a divinity point is. It is normal that I would not know, she says, since it is the currency gods use among themselves, and 100 million faith points condense into one. My throat closes around that number. 10 billion faith points for one course of treatment is not a price so much as a wall. I ask whether anything can at least slow it down. The water of life delays her divine kingdom's collapse, she says, but the Ney family stock is small and the open market charges a premium. Even her grandfather cannot keep her alive indefinitely by burning a strategic resource. Then she tells me it does not matter. Although we are now husband and wife, she says, I should not waste resources on this. She is terminally ill, and pouring money into treatment only ends with the family losing both the person and the funds. Her voice is calm, without a trace of fear of death anywhere in her eyes. The water of life. I have seen the entry in the mall, produced by a fountain of life at 1 drop every 10 years. Official price 1 million faith points. Permanently out of stock. For anyone else, 1 million a month is a serious wound, since a divine kingdom eats everything you feed it. I am not anyone else. With the evolution talent running and the Na family investment landing in my account, my monthly income is about to go somewhere absurd, and helping this nominal wife of mine is well within reach. There are no feelings between us yet. She is my angel investor, and keeping an investor alive is simply good practice. I turn toward the center of her divine kingdom and ask why she has so many moon wells and sun springs. 200 of them sit clustered down there, and the aura of life pouring off them is unbelievably thick. She tells me it is what remains after she liquidated everything else her divine kingdom owned. Her believers are too weak to support any other investment, so only fixed output buildings still generate income, which is at least an inheritance for a future child. And if she gets lucky enough to produce a fountain of life, she says, she might even live to walk her children to school. I think about it, then ask whether those buildings can be moved into my divine kingdom. I regret it before the sentence is finished. It sounds exactly like a man who cannot wait for a dying legacy to finish dying. The woman is not even gone, and here I am inventorying her estate, which is shameless by any standard I would apply to somebody else. The silence that follows is unpleasant, and from her face she did not expect it either. Then she sighs and tells me that after she dies, these assets pass to me to manage regardless, and that she has only a few years left. There is grief in her eyes, and helplessness, and underneath both of them something that looks like genuine confusion. I would happily slap myself across the face. It is not that I want to strip a dying woman's divine kingdom. It is that every one of those buildings would produce 10 times as much inside mine, and the reason is the one thing I can never say aloud. I start walking it back, telling her I was only joking, and she cuts across me and says she agrees. I ask whether I heard that correctly, and the shock is all over my face. She nods. She will transfer the buildings shortly, and we will sign a legal agreement covering it, and I may never sell them. Once our children's divine kingdoms awaken, the income those buildings generate must be transferred to the children every month. She states plainly, before I can agree to anything, that once the agreement is signed, I will not be able to walk it back later. The arrangement is supervised by the federal government, and if I violate its terms, the Na family will take me to court. Her tone is calm and cold, as if she were doing nothing more than closing a business deal. Na Yu told me her grandfather had already sent a moving company to my community, and that explaining it to my parents was my problem. She asked me to treat her well for whatever remained of her short life, calling me her partner in a voice with neither sadness nor warmth. Then a repulsive force threw me out of the virtual world. I pulled off the helmet and slapped myself for the way that sentence had come out. 200 moon wells and sun springs in her divine kingdom earned 1.2 million faith points a month at the normal rate of time, and inside mine they would earn 12 million. That arithmetic had been running under my tongue when I spoke, because at 12 million a month the water of life stops being a problem for either of us. Beautiful idea, catastrophic delivery, and the wife I had met 3 times now had me filed as a total scumbag. Na Yu came back to her study, wiped her eyes, and looked at her haggard face in the mirror. She asked herself what she had been hoping for, when she had seen enough of this sort of thing lately, and when it had been a partnership from the first line of the agreement. Na Xiongpeng knocked and asked whether the two of them were finished talking. She nodded, and when he asked how she felt about that kid, she said he was not bad, and left the last unpleasant part out. Complaining further would only make trouble for her grandfather. He had investigated the family. My parents were only divine creatures, but their reputation in Yangguo community was good, and neither of them was petty. The villa would be left for her and for them, and with them looking after her, he could rest easier. He said he had to go clear land for the family, then pressed a card into her palm. It carried 5 drops of the water of life. She told him not to work so hard, and to stop pouring strategic resources into a divine kingdom like hers. He answered that he was a first-order god after all. If the water of life were not so scarce, and the market price not hyped so high, and the treasury not out of stock, he would gladly have supported her another 100 years. Her parents-in-law and I were moving in that day, he said, and she should use all 5 drops together, because on her wedding night his granddaughter had to look beautiful. She thanked him, and a little color came into her cheeks. He was leaving, and the two of us should work hard so he could hold a grandchild soon. The moment his aura vanished from the villa, her expression flattened back into its ordinary shape. She threw the card onto the table, folded her arms, and asked the empty room whether that scumbag deserved it. A dog who leeched off his wife's family. Apart from her grandfather, she decided, not one man alive was any good. Then she kicked the corner of the table hard enough that the pain brought the tears back. At home, I sat at the dining table with my parents, trying to explain the whole day in order. My mother asked whether the pressure of developing my divine kingdom had gotten too heavy lately, and my father proposed mortgaging the micro-ore vein. I told them their son deserved a little trust. Of course they trusted me, my mother said, but I could not make fun of my own parents like this. The Nayef family recruiting me as a live-in son-in-law, she recited back, with 100 million faith points the moment the contract was signed, plus a B-rank building. My father added that once the vein was mortgaged, they would take me to the psychiatric department of U Family Hospital. Every year, plenty of students break down under the load. Somebody knocked. My mother asked whether he had sent old Jiang out to buy food, and my father said the believers had enough and he had planned to buy more next month. The door opened on 5 burly men, and the aura rolling off the one in front belonged to a demigod. My father's voice shook as he asked whether this senior had come to the wrong place. Myungwoo community is the slum of Yang County, and every soul living in it is a divine creature, so a demigod in our doorway made about as much sense as a whale in the stairwell. The leader asked politely whether this was the home of young Master Yang Baeom, and my father turned around wearing an expression made entirely of question marks. I came to the door and asked who they were. The man greeted me by name and told me I was now a Tier 2 genius of the Na family. He introduced himself as Jun Unso, a guest elder assigned to handle my internal family affairs until I graduated from university. The other 4 were the movers arranged by Elder Na Sang-peng to carry my things to the villa in Yang City. I waved them in. The movers arrived with their own packing boxes and swallowed every room whole. My parents watched several rooms strip themselves bare in under a quarter of an hour. A demigod, the Na family, a villa in Yang City. Everything their son had said at the dinner table was apparently true. And even so, with John Unso standing there, neither of them dared say a word. The truck led the way while Jen Unso drove the 3 of us behind it. I started to address him as senior and he cut that off immediately. There was no need for formalities from a young master the family had rated a Tier 2 genius, since my achievements would not fall below his own. He was my assigned guide, and during my student years I could ask him anything. Looking at how meticulously the man carried himself, I asked whether every Na family genius came with a demigod attached. Only geniuses of Tier 2 and above, he said. 14 Tier 1 geniuses had not yet graduated from university, along with 468 Tier 2 geniuses. Nearly 500 demigods burned on escort duty alone. In my own batch, he added, there were only 2 Tier 1 geniuses, Miss Na Bing and Master Na Hun. There were also 76 Tier 2 geniuses, 28 of them from Yang County First High School, with most of the rest trained in the city. Then, apparently deciding the truck ahead was crawling, he switched on the autopilot and handed me a thin electronic tablet. The family stipend and the initial faith points would land that afternoon, he said, and there was also a B-rank building for me to select. The Baekryong blood pool took flesh and blood and converted it into blood pills which accelerate cultivation, with long-term consumption improving aptitude. The spirit weapon forge took ores and generated weapons automatically, their strength depending on the ore's rank, capable of mass-producing up to E-rank weapons. The heart of machinery slowly improved the physical structure of believers, bending their bodies toward a mechanical civilization. Unlike the mall, the tablet gave nothing but a name and one flat line of function. I asked Elder Jian whether 3 B-rank buildings were really the whole menu. B-rank buildings are strategic resources, he said, and even inside the Na family there are not many lying around for genius disciples. Translated out of the diplomatic register, I was a genius with an outside surname, so my building would come from the bottom shelf. I asked what he would suggest, because a demigod guide is a network resource I intended to use. It depended on the direction I chose, he said. Toward a mechanical civilization, take the heart of machinery outright. If I wanted to pull in faith points early and feed that back into believer strength later, the spirit weapon forge was a good choice. As for the Baekryong blood pool, he called it the most comprehensive of the 3, since the blood pills it produces raise believer strength and the annualized return on selling them is not low either. I settled on the blood pool. With the Na family investment on top of my evolution talent, my resource generation would run far ahead of anyone in my year. That made believer strength the scarcer good. Shoveling every faith point back into the divine kingdom to chase compound interest would never have produced the result that made a great family look twice at me. Resources matter in the era of divine kingdoms, but the core of the thing is still strength. I told him I would take the Baekryong blood pool. He said the application would be approved that afternoon, and the resources sent to my inbox. He had already added me as a friend in the virtual world. Divine Kingdom resource allocation, a family benefit application, some trivial matter of daily life, any of it could go straight to him. I thanked him, and he said seriously that there was no need. This was his job. At the Yang City Villa, he bowed and left. He was a guide, not a nanny, and the virtual world let him solve most of my problems remotely. The villa sat in the center of Yang County with excellent privacy, and the movers set everything in the front yard and drove off. Then Na Yu pushed open the door to the living room, called me husband, and smiled at me sweetly. I lost a second right there. Her skin had gone fair and soft, as though a touch would bruise it, and her whole body carried a thick aura of life. On top of that, she had the noble bearing that only comes out of a great family, and for a moment I could not look away. I had assumed several evenings of Yu Yoyon's training built up my resistance to beauty. My state of mind clearly required further cultivation. Before I could get a word out, she went to my parents, bowed, and greeted her mother-in-law and her father-in-law. My mother looked at this girl who could have walked out of a palace, rubbed her eyes hard, and asked whether she was really her daughter-in-law. Na Yu said of course she was. Then she added that her divine kingdom was damaged and her lifespan short, so she was frankly punching above her weight with her husband. Before she died, she only hoped to have children with him, and she would be satisfied with that. She squeezed out one tear on cue. My mother went straight past anxious, smacked the back of my head, then took me by the ear and hauled me in front of my wife. She told her daughter-in-law not to talk nonsense, because she knew exactly what this boy was worth. For a girl like that to take a liking to him was a blessing he had earned across 10 lifetimes. From that day forward, Na Yu was the boss of this house, and if I ever bullied her, she and old Yang would break my legs. My mother is a simple, kind-hearted woman, and one pitiful expression was enough to make her wish the girl had been born to her. Her actual biological son had already been filed at the back of that loving heart. A flash of cunning went through Na Yu's eyes as she watched me stand there, and I could read the smugness without a translator. 2 kind parents, and somehow they had produced a man who wanted to live off a woman. My father, hauling a moving bag, told his daughter-in-law that the son was strong and she should rest while they handled the boxes. She thanked him and called him Dad. Even with the water of life in her, her divine kingdom was a room leaking air from every seam. Those life energies would seep away over time, so as a deity she had to keep her exertion down. I turned to follow her upstairs, and my mother called me back to help. That confused me, since our family did not own enough to need a second pair of hands. I went out and carried furniture anyway, and my mother waited until we were alone to whisper her real message. Such a good girl, and I had better treat her well, and if she found out I had let little Yu suffer any grievance, she would not be done with me. I started to say I had not done anything, and she asked why her daughter-in-law had looked ready to cry a minute ago. I had said some genuinely rotten things that morning, but the woman I said them to had been putting out an aura stronger than mine. The person who came through the living room door was somebody else entirely, and that was exactly what I wanted to go upstairs and ask about. My father came over with his own solemn contribution. There was nothing wrong with being a live-in son-in-law, he said, especially not for the Ney family. I had landed an enormous bargain and should not be ungrateful, and from now on I could stay home and pamper my wife. He felt not 1 gram of dissatisfaction. What sat in him instead was the worry that happiness this size evaporates. We were ordinary divine creatures, and against a behemoth like the Na family there was no comparison, so all he could do was tell me to cherish her. The villa was equipped down to the last corner, with intelligent robots, massage chairs, temperature and humidity controllers, and furniture giving off expensive fragrance. My father decided none of what we had dragged over was presentable, packed the old furniture into his pocket, and dumped it outside the courtyard. Since the child had hooked a wealthy woman, there was no sense in the parents suffering on principle. I went upstairs and pushed the bedroom door open. Na Yu was half reclined on the bed in her pajamas, and when she heard me she opened her eyes and issued instructions in a level voice. Drink the medicine on the table, which was a fertility potion, go shower immediately, and we would get down to business in 10 minutes. Not a trace of the pitiful creature from the living room remained. She looked at me like a stranger, calm and clear-eyed, and in her natural state she was beautiful in a way the damage had only made lazier. I coughed and asked what was happening to her body. 5 drops of the water of life taken at once would suppress the poison fog temporarily, she said, and it would not last long. Then she told me to stop dawdling because she wanted to sleep afterward. The distance in her tone made it awkward, but I followed the instructions. She startled when I came back and leaned over her. She said she was not in good health and asked me to be gentle, biting her lip, holding my gaze on purpose, even with fear plain in her eyes. I told her quietly that I was not a scumbag, and that there had been a real reason behind that morning. She shut her eyes and told me to hurry, that she was very tired, and I said that if I hurried I could not also be gentle. She called me a deadbeat scumbag and threatened to call her parents. I asked whether she was sure she wanted to make that call at this particular moment, and she asked whether I was trying to die. Her condition really was poor, and it was her first time, and even with everything under control she found it hard. Afterwards, she slept with her face pale against the pillow, and I stroked her cheek and told her seriously that I would cure her. Yu Yoyan of the Heavenly Fragrance World was a professional performing a service. Na Yu was the first woman in my life, and after only a handful of meetings, she had already moved me. Life is a road, and people with strong hearts keep walking it, but nothing says the walk has to be lonely. If someone treats me with sincerity, I will return it in the same coin. I was not sleepy, so I opened the inbox on my wristwatch. The Na family notice congratulated the outsider Tier 2 genius Yang Biom on his Tier 2 evaluation, and awarded me the B-rank building, the Baekryong blood pool. A card carrying it dropped into my right hand. Alongside it sat the buildings Na Yu had transferred, wrapped in a legal document I had to sign before the resources would release. I read it through, found nothing objectionable and signed, then entered my divine kingdom and started loading. Moon wells and sun springs deployed across divine enlightenment city, and a terrifying aura of life spread out until the surrounding plants grew like something had insulted them. Then came the B-rank building. The Baekryong blood pool had a footprint of 200 square kilometers, which meant it did not fit inside any city I owned. I lifted a mountain outside Divine Enlightenment City out of the way and set the pool in the hole it left. A powerful smell of blood rolled outward, pure and dense with vitality rather than rot, so believers living nearby would not sicken from it. My panel came back with 143.22 million faith points. Daily faith points provided 3.7. The building's line listed 207 moon wells, 207 sun springs, and 1 B-rank Baekryong blood pool. The 36 million from Yang County First High School, the 100 million initial investment from the Na family, and the 5 million monthly subsidy had all arrived together. I pushed the excitement down. With a sum that size, how I spent it mattered more than how fast, and it was worth asking somebody who had done this before. I went into the virtual world, where invitations from classmates were already stacked up, Lee Soo-ho and Jang Pang among them. I ignored them, opened Jeon Unso's chat box, and asked politely whether he had time. A coordinate address came back. I tapped it, and my consciousness was pulled into a small pavilion where we sat alone, while the noise outside carried chatter, shouting, ironware, and waves of heat. I asked where we were. Patiently, he explained that this was the Na family's base in the virtual world. In this era, the economic activity generated inside it had long since passed reality, so calling it a mirror of the real world understated the case. Every major family maintains a base here where they trade, study, and even fight. He said all of it without a trace of condescension, because he had climbed up from the bottom himself. I bowed and told him the resources had arrived, and I had come for advice. He said with a wry smile that I had to stop calling him senior, since my status inside the Na family sat above his own. I protested, and he cut in that he was several hundred years my senior, so Elder John would do. He asked how many faith points I was holding, and when I said 140 million, his eyes widened. I explained that 36 million came from the school competition, and he said that explained the Tier 2 rating, then asked whether the Baekryong blood pool was loaded. It was, I told him. His first suggestion was to buy 10 adult Taies and fill the pool to capacity. In real time, that would steadily produce around 10,000 blood pills a month at 100 faith points a pill. The annualized return came to roughly 50% before counting the value of the B-rank building itself. I asked whether that return was not a little low. He said that counting only the input cost of the Taies meat, the return is excellent. But a B-rank building is worth 500 million and up, so measured against that, the return is in fact terrible. The pool produces blood pills according to the energy in the flesh you feed it, and 10 Taies are nowhere near its ceiling. When I became a demigod or a god, he said, I should slaughter high-level alien believers and cast their bodies into it, and the yield would climb into the tens or hundreds of thousands. For now, buying corpses off the mall costs far too much. Given the state of my divine kingdom, Taisi meat was the most cost-effective feed, and it removed the need to order believers to keep throwing flesh in by hand. AB rank building in the hands of a student is simply overpowered, and there was no way to run it near its limit. I was not bothered. With the evolution talent over the top of it, 10 Taiesi in that pool meant a fixed monthly income of 10 million, which is a strange thing to call a disappointing return. He offered me a resource procurement list if I wanted to raise believer strength fast, and told me to judge for myself, since every divine kingdom develops differently. If instead I cared about ecological stability, species diversity, and the resource self-sufficiency rate, he suggested paying an actuary. I asked what an actuary charges. The cheapest, he said, is 50 million faith points. I swallowed hard and he laughed. Do not call it expensive, he said, because actuaries have real skills. They adjust the species distribution inside a divine kingdom, establish buffer zones between organisms, and set the training methods and directions for believers. Every major family keeps them on staff. Hiring one once can carry you to demigod without ever replanning, so anyone with enough faith points should not be stingy. I thanked him and privately decided never to spend that money. For me, the cheapest commodity in the world is time. The 50 million an actuary costs buys planning I can replace with brute force. Spent instead on raw resources, it goes into the divine kingdom, where evolution and survival of the fittest do the sorting while the assets earn on the side. He had sent over 2 documents, one on raising believer strength, and one collecting his thoughts on divine kingdom investment. They were personal opinions from a man whose aptitude was worse than mine, he warned, so I should take only the parts that fit. I thanked him properly, because the early development notes of a demigod outweigh most of what a school library holds. A Tier 2 genius of the Na family also qualifies for a 50 million faith point loan at an annual interest rate of only 11.2%. He had already filed the application. I could also walk into the Na family's virtual world base whenever I liked. Its internal trade in weapons, medicinal materials, spirit plants, and pills runs thinner than the official platform, but much cheaper, since there is no tax. His last advice was to work on the strength of my believers, because the better I performed, the more support would follow. I filed all of it and dropped out of the virtual world. Carrying that much idle money made my skin itch. But before any large purchase, I opened his documents. The investment file declared that the development of a divine kingdom rests on resources, that the point is to make resources snowball, and that the choice of investment is therefore everything. Jian Unso described himself as an ordinary man who reached demigod purely on the quality of his financial planning. Then came his basic philosophy. An ordinary person should not touch any investment with an annualized return below 80%. Underneath that stiff demigod exterior, the man was a financial animal, and his creed ran perpendicular to how I intended to live. His flagship example was the century-old bloodthirsting spirit mushroom. Seeds cost almost nothing, 10,000 of them for 10,000 faith points. Each plant needs a believer assigned to tend it and water it daily with that believer's own blood, until it matures 100 years later. A single century-old blood spirit mushroom sells for as much as 10 faith points, and in real time the margin multiplies tenfold in 3 months. This was the secret behind his demigod level, he wrote, and he would not have shared it with anyone he did not favor. Then, with the same flat courtesy, he listed the drawback. The method eats believers. Tended that way, a believer usually does not live past 30, and across a century the operation consumes roughly 50,000 of them. The practice therefore cannot be scaled, and 5% of the total believer population is the optimal planting quantity. He noted it should be run alongside a D rank or better breeding card, and wrote, "Remember, remember," at the end. A chill went up my back. This well-pressed demigod was behind the curtain a capitalist of the purest kind, selling his believers' blood by the drop. It is not that I have warm feelings for believers. It is that a model shaped like that leaves a cold print on you, and the population of such a divine kingdom would flatline for the whole century it ran. With the evolution talent in my hands, there was no reason to walk a crooked road. so I opened the other file. The blood demon flower, a C-rank spirit plant, planted in wide belts around a city, gives believers appetite and an urge to exercise, and their bodies improve sharply in the short term. It also erodes their consciousness, degrades comprehension by degrees, and damages their foundation long term, so the file recommended it strictly as a boost, 1 month before an assessment. The meat-swallowing technique, a C-rank cultivation technique, makes practitioners crave meat to an extreme, swells their bodies and costs them flexibility while raising both defense and offense. It came with a warning to monitor living conditions constantly, because if the meat supply falls short, believers will kill each other, trade their children for food, or simply eat one another. I tilted my head at the screen and decided not to say what I was thinking. I could not connect any of this to the courteous man who had driven my parents across town. My honest read is that Jeon Unso's divine kingdom has already hit the end of its potential, and that he will not break into the god realm this lifetime, pulling up the shoots to make them grow, and calling the height a harvest. If he had heard me say that, he would probably have started cursing. For an ordinary man to climb to the demigod realm on his own legs, without touching one of those crooked roads, is not a thing that happens. His potential may be spent, but out of 10,000 ordinary people like him, does even one demigod appear? He handed me that experience in good faith. Costs listed as plainly as profits, one ordinary man extending sympathy to another. The only problem was that his kindness had been mailed to a person holding an SSS-Rank talent. I muttered that his methods were too extreme, and that reading them had wasted an evening. My faith points now read 193.22 million, which meant the 50 million loan from the Na family had landed. I opened the shop and bought 15 adult Taisi for 28 million faith points. 10 went straight into the Baekryong blood pool, and the other 5 stood beside my 5 major cities as fixed channels of flesh and blood. To round the numbers off, I bought 193 more moon wells and 193 more sun springs, spending 115.8 million in one stroke. Those 2 buildings are my long-term fixed position, and I will never cut corners there. As their count rises, the evolution talent multiplies the odds of one mutating into a fountain of life tenfold against anyone on Blue Star. Best of all, I never have to think about it again. Last, I bought the C-rank muscle and tendon strengthening and marrow cleansing technique for 2 million, and watched my balance settle at 47.42 million. With everything loaded, I issued a divine oracle. To reward their performance in the war against the alien races, I had bestowed a miracle, and beside every major city there now stood an adult Taesis. Outside Divine Enlightenment City lay the Baekryong blood pool, which every 30 years produces 10,000 blood pills. Only the strong were worthy of consuming them, and the pills would significantly improve their physical fitness. The new technique was called the Muscle and Tendon Strengthening and Marrow Cleansing Technique, and practiced together with the Federal Body Refining Technique, it would raise their strength quickly. Fanaticism swept every city as the words came down. My panel read the whole ledger back to me. It named me Divine Lord Yang Biome, over a divine kingdom of 1 million square kilometers, with my listed talent still the F-rank resource talent that grows everything 10% faster. Beneath it sat the SSS-Rank evolution talent, unique, able to accelerate the evolution of my divine kingdom, and still flagged as hidden. My believers came to 5 Tier 1 beings and 70,000 mortals. The techniques line listed the Federal Body Refining Technique, the Muscle and Tendon Strengthening and Marrow Cleansing Technique, and the Myriad Spirits Return to Origin Array at Minor Mastery. Faith points stood at 47.42 million with 3.7 arriving daily. The buildings line gave me 400 moon wells, 400 sun springs, and 1 B-rank Baekryong blood pool. Under assets sat 78,777 Bodhi treasure snakes at Tier 1 monster, plus 15 Tais. After them came 21,000 water lotus at F-rank spirit plant, 1,900 year soul nourishing wood at C-rank, and 35,700 and 1,100 spirit peaches at C-rank spirit plant. Under the evolution talent, the moon wells and sun springs would throw off 24 million faith points a month, and the Tais-fed blood pool would add 10 million. With the monster and spirit plant assets on top, my real monthly income cleared 35 million. The blood pills would not be sold, because everyone goes into cultivating my own believers, while the Moonlight Dew and Yang Essence earnings fund further investment. What I wanted now was time to walk the shop and study the listings I could never afford. Trading notes with classmates might turn up a building or spirit plant that suited me better. Faith points can never be fully earned, and a man should keep a reserve, especially a man with a terminally ill wife who needs water of life bought fresh every month. I looked at the woman asleep on the bed, felt the whole day land on me at once, and went under with her in my arms. Early the next morning, I went into the Divine Kingdom to check on things. With the new technique running, my believers' meat consumption had climbed to a whole new tier. With 5 Taezi beside the cities and blood pills on schedule, it barely registered. Even at 10 times the ordinary flow of time, Development still needs time, and standing over a divine kingdom you are not investing in is a way of doing nothing slowly. I did wonder whether to buy breeding cards and force the pace. Last time the resource burden nearly broke my back. There was no assessment on the horizon, and letting the place develop on its own was the better play. Too much is the same disease as too little. My consciousness was still inside when the person in my arms moved, and I came back fast. Na Yu opened her eyes, discovered where she was lying, and found me looking at her. Her face went red, and she tried to push me off before working out that her body was far too weak for that. She told me to let go. I asked what she was being shy about, given that we had already bared everything to each other. She asked whether I had no shame at all, and I asked whether a husband holding his wife counted as shameless. Watching the once noble daughter of a great family cast into the mortal world and picked up by a country bumpkin, I could not resist teasing her a little more. My mother's voice came through the door asking whether Yang Bom and Yu Ya were awake, since the meal was ready. Na Yu answered first, calling her mom and saying she would be down shortly. My mother told her that if she had not slept enough she should sleep longer, and that she would send that brat Yang Bom up with a tray so she could eat in bed. Na Yu said there was no need. I gave the beautiful woman in my arms a long look and asked whether she had a split personality. She said no. I asked why her attitude toward me and her attitude toward my parents belonged to two different women. She said that when she faces good people she is a good person, and when she faces bad people she is a bad person, and went on getting dressed while she said it. I rubbed my temples and told her I had already explained yesterday's business. She told me that instead of listening to what a person says, it is better to watch what they do, and left the room with that hanging behind her. The refrigerator was stocked entirely with Tier 2 and Tier 3 monster beast meat, which tells you everything about the family she came from. At the table, the atmosphere went stiff, because both my parents were watching the young lady so carefully that neither dared pick up their chopsticks. Then Na Yu put a piece of meat in her mouth, lit up, and said Mom's cooking was really good and that she wanted to eat it every day. My mother exhaled, and the whole table loosened at once. My wife's ability to charm elders is a trained skill, and standing next to it, nothing I say to my own parents has ever been believed once. At this rate, I will be the third favorite person in my own house by month's end. After the meal, we went upstairs, and I took Na Yu's right hand and transferred 5 million faith points into her divine kingdom. She felt the change land, looked puzzled, and asked why. I told her plainly that I would transfer the same amount every month. Until I had the ability to cure her, she should spend it on the water of life and keep herself stable. She stared at me with confusion and a thin edge of wariness in it. 5 million was nothing against the assets she had signed over to me, but the direction of the transfer was the part she could not process, since scumbags are supposed to take and never give. She wondered whether she had misjudged me, or whether I was playing the long game and fishing for something larger. The problem with the second theory was that her divine kingdom held no assets anymore, and her remaining faith points covered basic supplies and nothing else. Her only remaining value was a grandfather who was a first-order god, and a divine creature coveting the property of a god is a creative form of suicide. She started to say something, stopped, and when I asked what, she said it was nothing. Then she advised me to consider only the rights and obligations written into the contract, and warned that overthinking it would leave me holding nothing at all. I asked what she meant. She said to forget it if I did not understand, then went back to lying down. The 5 drops suppressing the poison in her divine kingdom had given her the first good sleep in a long time, and she intended to collect more of it. I told her I was going into the virtual world for class, and not to disturb me unless something mattered. Every eye in the classroom turned when I walked in. Half a dozen classmates greeted me as Yang Hyung, and my standing in class 7, third year, had quietly leveled with Lee Soo-ho's. Jang Kang jumped up and shouted for his godfather across the room, waving at a seat he had saved. I strolled over enjoying the performance, and found the man oddly restrained once I sat. I asked what was wrong, and he started with another godfather, and I told him to just call me Yang Hyung, since a joke that good only works once. He said fine, then asked whether I had really married into the Na family and become a Tier 2 genius of theirs. I asked how he knew, because all of it had happened the previous day. He said the whole school already knew. Class 1, third year, is packed with direct descendants of the Na family, and the news had gone through the chat groups from 10 people to 100, overnight. Yang County is only so big, he said, and there are no secrets in it. He went on being envious, saying that running into a thing like that was incredible luck. The Na family is one of the 2 great families, and in his telling I had flown up the branch and turned into a real dragon. In his view, nobody just becomes a Na family son-in-law, so they must have seen my potential. Then he asked when I was coming to his house for a meal and told me to bring his sister-in-law. I said my wife's health made going out inconvenient, so he should come to my place, and he immediately booked a free dinner that night. I mentioned I had moved and would send the address, and he complained that I had moved too fast. Lee Chongyang came into the classroom while we were still talking, and her gaze rested on me a moment longer than on anyone else. She opened by saying that after the school's first major assessment, some students had gone through the motions while others had brought home an enormous harvest. Since the matter was finished, she would neither criticize nor praise anyone. Next came the midterm exam. For the students in our class walking the War Divine Kingdom path, this was an important streaming exam, with rewards from the school and evaluations from whichever faction had claimed them. The midterm exam in 3 months, she said, is a competition second only to the college entrance examination, so nobody could afford to coast. Then she asked student Yang Byum what insights he had into the growth paths of believers. Not again. I do not like answering questions in class, and all I have ever wanted was to sit there quietly and absorb the material. I coughed and told Teacher Lee that I had no unique insights to offer. She looked openly skeptical and did not believe a word of it. I had scored above 20 in the first prosperity rating assessment, and a knowledge reserve like that implies a boy who lives in the library. Having decided that I had tricked her once already, she filed this as another round of playing the fool to catch the tiger. What she said out loud was that the top student in her class was too low-key to hold up as an example. She turned her head and told Lee Suho to answer instead. He stood and delivered the whole thing without a stumble. Once believers reach the status of mortals, he said, they begin breaking through levels from Tier 1 creatures up to Tier 5 creatures. After that, the Divine Kingdom has to choose a development direction, which is what the teacher calls a path. There are 3 common paths for human Divine Kingdoms. The cultivation path trains techniques from the inside out, sorts believers by spiritual roots of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, and runs through realms named Chi Refining, Foundation Establishment, Golden Core, and Nascent Soul. The martial arts path trains from the outside in, through Martial Disciple, Martial Master, Martial King, and Martial Emperor. The mechanical path abandons technique cultivation for technological modification of the body, divided into first-class intelligent life, second-class intelligent life, and onward. Beyond those 3, there is the Phantom God path, which works on the spiritual level, and the zombie path, which follows a virus route. He finished by noting that information on the rare paths is thin, that they suit only specific groups, and that their direction is too narrow to recommend without special circumstances. Lee Cheong-young was pleased. She said he was worthy of being the top student of the class. Even after becoming a Tier 2 genius of the Lee family, he still made time to learn everything he could, and his future achievements would be extraordinary if he kept it up. He thanked her, said his theoretical knowledge still had a long way to go, and he would not dare show off in front of his classmates, then aimed one very deliberate glance at me. Officially, the default top student of Class 7 is now me, and answering every question with "I do not know" is universally read as modesty. Sitting under all those admiring looks made my skin crawl, because I genuinely did not know a thing Lee Suho had said. Everyone listened hard for the rest of the period, especially the students who believe they have a real shot at demigod. Lee Cheong-young laid out the direction, advantages, and disadvantages of each path with total clarity, and I sat up straight. She closed by telling anyone aiming at demigod or god to start preparing immediately. Cultivation path Divine Kingdom should begin growing spirit plants and spirit fruits, since believers who consume rare treasures over a long period produce geniuses with spiritual roots at a much higher rate. The martial path requires precious medicines that temper the body, and the mechanical path requires family backing to buy a mechanical heart as early as possible. Then her figure vanished from the virtual world. Lee Suho stood up the second she was gone and announced that the brothers were gathering at the usual place on him, and the boys went off like a firecracker in a bucket. The girls looked less thrilled, since Class 7 now contained 2 people worth trading Divine Kingdom notes with, and neither was going anywhere they could follow. Lee Suho's fondness for the heavenly fragrance world meant no invitation was coming, and nobody was shameless enough to invite herself. The quiet verdict among the female half of the class was that these boys were a disappointment, and none would ever be worth marrying. In the private room at the heavenly fragrance world, Lee Suho and I took the innermost seats facing the door, with Wang Jinwoo on his right and Zhang Peng on my left. Everyone else sat wherever, since they were all gods on the logistics path, headed for the same destination. Lee Suho raised his glass and congratulated me on the Na family investment, saying I would soar from here and become a true god, and the rest lifted their glasses. A few days had turned me into a member of a major family, and barring accidents, they would all be looking up at me. I told them they were being too kind and that we should make progress together. I had not put on airs back when I awakened an SSS-Rank talent, so a family investment was hardly going to start me now. Honestly, the whole thing only smoothed the road a little. My flat reaction apparently registered as unfathomable depth. Around that table, the read was that a man who takes an investment from the Ney family and stays that calm must be the class's top student in truth, unswayed by gain or loss, carrying himself like a man who had already lived several centuries. Lee Suho gave me a thumbs up and said he still had a lot to learn from Yang Hyung. I told him earnestly that it was the other way around, and that the answers he gave in class had genuinely broadened my horizons. His face flushed and he glared at me, telling me to stop playing the fool to catch the tiger, and to stop being sarcastic with so many classmates listening. That stunned me, since I had said exactly what I meant. Jiang Peng jumped in to smooth it over, saying we were all classmates and it was only a joke and everybody should drink. Somebody else agreed that we had not gathered once in the half month since the major exams. After that, the table turned into a trading floor. One classmate had cultivated another 5,000 adult Bodhi treasure snakes and offered them to Wang Jinwu, who said he would take every one. Another had a batch of E-rank ice begonia flowers, good in medicine and for awakening spiritual roots when consumed long-term. He offered to grow them for us at a negotiable price. A third mentioned that he had 3 micro-ore veins in his divine kingdom, and asked, with great casualness, whether either of us happened to be short a subordinate god. Everything in that room orbited Li Suho and me, mostly me, since nobody had heard of me holding a single subordinate god. Li Suho shook his head and said he already had 3, Maja, Weipeng, and Yumo, and needed nothing more. Those 3 are precisely the students in Class 7 with the best resource-type talents. One has a planting talent, one an animal husbandry talent, and one a small ore vein of his own. More subordinate gods is not automatically better. Once the contract signs, the vassal's divine kingdom opens to the protector, who must station troops there, reinforce it against invasion, and potentially launch a divine kingdom war over somebody else's land. A subordinate god sells you his resources cheap and puts your needs first, and nobody hands over that much value without expecting the bill later. There is no risk of war before university graduation, so during school the arrangement is pure profit for the protector, but every gram of it gets repaid eventually. The contract is not federal law either. It carries rule-level restrictions closer to an oath sworn between gods, and violating it calls down heavenly punishment, with the Divine Kingdom core shattering in the worst cases. That is why so many Logistics Path Divine Kingdoms sign themselves over while still in school. Classmates are trusted more than strangers, and once you graduate into a society where your Divine Kingdom can be invaded, your bargaining position collapses, and you sell your resources for scraps. Every gaze in the room drifted toward me. In Class 7, only Li Suho, Wang Jinwu, and I are qualified to accept subordinate gods. Li Suho was not accepting, and anyone with functioning eyes could see my ceiling sat well above Wang Jinwu's. The stronger the main god, the higher his subordinate gods rise with him. Every grain merchant, weapon workshop, and butcher shop in the residential districts leans on some powerful god, or their resources would have been taken long ago. I said I had not thought that far ahead. With the evolution talent, I am not short of basic resources, so there is no engine driving me to collect vassals. Disappointment went around the table like a draft. 2 of them told me to contact them the moment I changed my mind. One added that his father was taking out a loan to buy him another micro-ore vein, and that if nothing else, he could supply weapons for my entire student career. I said I would keep it in mind, and meant almost none of it. The classmate who had sold the Bodhi treasure snakes asked whether old Wang's own good exam result had brought in any investment. Wang Jinwu said the Ma clan had given him 20 C-rank buildings plus 100,000 faith points every month. Somebody asked whether that was the big grain merchant of Yang County, and somebody else told Wang Hyung the package was substantial. Envy went around the table, since that subsidy is an astronomical figure to an ordinary household. He smiled and said his initial investment could be considered earned back, which is the answer of a man neither satisfied nor disappointed. Against what the Na family had put on me, it was nothing, but for him it was an account he could give his family with a straight back. For the rest of the evening, the table traded notes on investments, believer strength, monster beasts, and spirit plants. Somewhere in the middle of it, I started to frown. Since the Na family investment landed, the things my classmates discuss have stopped occupying the same shelf as my own problems. With the Baekryong blood pool producing blood pills on a schedule, there is no reason for me to cultivate the low-tier spirit plants they were recommending. With a monthly income in the tens of millions, their small-scale venture investments are rounding errors. I decided quietly that I had attended my last class reunion. People climb toward higher ground the way water runs to lower ground, and those hours belong on the god form now. Once everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, Li Suho put the rest of them in a separate private room, and soon it was only the 2 of us. He asked, smiling, whether the gathering had turned boring now that the Na family had invested in me. I admitted it had, then asked why he enjoys organizing these things. Because his situation is identical to mine, and at this level he can only dispense advice while gaining nothing back. He said a divine kingdom develops mainly through its own evolution, that pouring resources in and staring accomplishes nothing, and that besides the library a man has to find some amusement. Then he asked with enormous pride whether I did not think being the center of attention felt great. So that was it. He simply likes an audience, and I got a headache. Getting down to business, he said the group leader had assigned him to invite me into the group and had sent a link. I asked what group leader and looked at the message, which said the Yang County Genius Exchange Group of the class of 2026 invited me to join. I tapped it. The administrator approved within a few breaths, and messages began stacking up. Somebody demanded a gift envelope from the newcomer. Somebody welcomed me and reminded new members that the group uses real names with an affiliation prefix in front. Sheol Pung of the Blacksmith Association offered my believers weapons at prices he guaranteed beat them all. And Wang Wan, a member of the Li family by marriage, proposed drinks sometime. Lee Soo-ho told me a first-timer should send a gift envelope of 100,000 faith points, and I nodded, since an expenditure that size no longer registers. The envelope pulled half the group out of hiding. When I opened the record afterward, the luckiest one turned out to be a familiar name, and Na Bing had taken 30,000 of it. Lee Soo-ho looked at the 199 faith points he had grabbed and nearly coughed up blood. The group leader was terrifying, he said, snatching 30,000 out of 100,000 against 100 other hands. I asked whether the whole group was made up of those Class 1 geniuses. Pretty much, he said. Mainly the new generation of the major families in Yang County, plus a few like us who stood out during the awakening and the grand competition. The group leader is Na Bing and the vice group leader is Li Chao-hang, the top two prodigies in the whole of First High School. Then he asked whether I had just called the Class 7 gathering meaningless. The people in this group are the actual elite of this year, he said, most of them born into major families. Their divine kingdom heritage, personal insight, and information sources all sit above ours. Everything he had ever shown off at a class reunion, he admitted with an awkward smile, was relayed secondhand from here. No wonder, I said, since I had assumed the Li family kept gods on hand to lecture him. He rolled his eyes and asked whether I thought gods were that idle. However much of a genius any of us is, we are still divine creatures, and to a god we are ants. Unless you are a direct family member, those elders will not even nod at a tier 2 genius in a corridor. Then he turned serious. Divine creatures, demigods, and gods all have to trade, cooperate to explore unknown realms, and lend each other a hand because that is the norm. Anyone who stays isolated gets left further behind. He described the exchange group as a small circle of mutual recognition where members trade resources, share news, and sometimes run events together. After graduation into university, he said, the same members become allies for offense and defense. His last instruction was not to mute the group, because this one is genuinely useful. I thanked him, and he waved that off, saying 2 people from Class 7 were naturally closer than the rest anyway. Then a message with thorns on it dropped into the feed. Somebody wrote that I was merely a live-in son-in-law of his Na family, and asked when exactly the threshold for entering this group had fallen so low. The nickname on it read Na Myung Yeon, a direct descendant of the Na family. I frowned at it. Lee Soo-ho said the same person had been sniping the day before, while the group debated whether I qualified at all, and asked how a man who joined that week had already offended somebody. I shook my head and said I did not know him, and he suggested the man might be a troublemaker with something wrong upstairs. Everyone in that group is a classmate, and admission itself certifies enough potential to matter. Developing a divine kingdom is a distance race and nobody can see the finish, so even people who privately despise each other still smile in the group chat. Someone who mocks another member in the open is an outlier by definition. The group leader answered him. Na Bing wrote that my talent was strong enough and I was qualified to join, and asked whether he had an opinion about it, and the entire channel went silent. She is the #1 person in the 3rd year of high school in Yang County this year, an absolute boss, and once she has spoken there is nobody willing to talk back. In the Na family villa district, Na Myung-hyun slammed his virtual helmet onto the floor and told the empty room that a bumpkin daring to compete with him should just wait. He had no way to aim any of that at Na Bing, so all of it rerouted onto me. A private message from Na Bing arrived a moment later. She told me not to worry about Na Myung-hyun, to contact her if he caused trouble, and to take good care of her cousin. So the defense had never been about me. It was about Na Yu, which meant my cheap wife is on speaking terms with the ice beauty at the top of the school year, and nobody had mentioned it. With a wife at home, I no longer had the face to spend the night at the heavenly fragrance world. Under Lee Soo-ho's deeply understanding look, I dropped back into reality. Na Yu had already finished her bath and was lying on the bed, and she issued the evening's instructions the moment she saw me. Take my medicine, take a bath, get to business. The woman schedules a marriage the way a foreman schedules a shift. I asked whether she knew Na Myung-hyun. Her expression shifted at the name, disgust flickering through it, and she asked whether he had caused me trouble. There it was. I had joined days ago and had not met half the family, so the only way I could already be somebody's enemy was by inheriting the position from my wife. I said it was not exactly trouble. She told me that Na Myung-hyun's talent is average, but both his parents are first-order gods, and that she is a year ahead of him. Before her divine kingdom was damaged, he had pursued her, and she had turned him down. Later, when her incident happened, her grandfather had tried to trade on that old history, offering a larger dowry so the two of them could unite and have a child. The man responded with disdain. He not only demanded core assets out of her grandfather's divine kingdom, he also wanted a prenuptial agreement stating that he would bear none of the child-rearing expenses afterward. The two families came out of that with real bad blood between them, and she believed it was why he had turned on me. She hid nothing, and there was an apology in her eyes by the end. Great families really can eat a person and leave no bones on the plate. He wanted the dowry and also declined to feed his own offspring, and I have to ask what exactly he believed his genes were worth. It also explained something that had bothered me since the signing. The post-nuptial agreement Na Songpeng wrote leaned absurdly far in favor of an outsider like me, and now I knew there had been a precedent to correct. I told her not to think about it anymore, and that she could rest assured I would cure her. I kissed her, went to shower, and came back, and when I leaned over her, she said quietly that it did not hurt as much today and I could do whatever I wanted. However much I wanted to show off, her body decided the pace and I kept it gentle. Afterward, I told her I'd planned to have a friend over for breakfast, and she hummed that it was fine and waved a hand, too tired to move. I sent the villa address to Jiang Peng and slept. Early the next morning, my mother's voice came through the door, telling Bioma that little Jiang had arrived and the food was nearly ready. Na Yu asked whether this friend was important enough that she should put on makeup. In a great family, etiquette is armor, and I am her husband now, so she intended to protect my face in front of outsiders. I told her he was my best friend, and that casual clothes were right for him. Then I told her the rest. There is a wide gap in status now, but human relationships were never built purely out of interests, and everyone keeps a few friends from childhood. Whether you grow into a god or stay a divine creature, you can still eat barbecue with them at a roadside stall. She looked at me with genuine surprise, and her opinion of the interest-first scumbag shifted a degree or two. Downstairs, Jiang Peng was knocking on things and gawking at the furniture. I had really made it, he said, since only gods and their families are allowed into these Yang City villas. The instant Na Yu appeared beside me, Jiang Peng snapped upright and delivered a textbook military salute. He greeted his sister-in-law, introduced himself as Yang Hyung's subordinate, apologized for the intrusion, and promised to go through fire and water at her command. She managed a soft hello. She had never met anything like him. His face was pure flattery, but his eyes were clear enough that she could tell he meant it. My father called us to eat while helping my mother in the kitchen. He had watched Jiang Peng grow up, and having somebody from Yongwol community visit made both my parents happy. Jiang Peng muttered around a mouthful that he had wanted to mooch dinner the previous night, except Li Suho had invited him out and it would have been a waste. My father asked casually where they went. Jiang Peng said Cheonwol Tea House, then added that the tea there is very good, and put his head down over his bowl. Close call. He nearly detonated his best friend's marriage over a plate of eggs. My father remarked that he does not understand young people drinking tea for that many hours. Jiang Peng did not answer, because with Na Yu sitting right there, every additional sentence was another chance to die. His Hyung is a married man now, and even if the heavenly fragrance world involves no physical transaction, plenty of women count emotional cheating as cheating. He looked like he wanted to slap himself twice for a mouth that will not stop. I ate a spirit fruit and asked whether there was something he needed to discuss in the real world. I know my best friend, and his expression had been off since I invited him. He put it out plainly. His father had told him to build a relationship with me fast and become my subordinate god. He had missed me when he sent invitations in the virtual world. Class and parties were too crowded, and being rejected in public would have cost him more face than he owns. My parents stood up and retreated to the kitchen without a word. They had heard about their son's school results through enough channels to find it reasonable that classmates would want to become his subordinate god. A contract of that weight is not something the older generation sits in on. I told him it was no problem. He blinked and asked whether I was really agreeing just like that, since we had not even signed anything. Then he volunteered that his father called me highly likely to become a god. As long as the Divine Kingdom resources came in at no worse than a 50% discount, he could accept the terms. Before I could respond, Na Yu could not hold it in. She asked whether we were really that close, and pointed out that this is not how a subordinate god contract gets negotiated. She used to hold subordinate gods of her own, negotiated in the virtual world under cameras covering every angle, argued line by line across hours. Here, one party had agreed, without reading it, and the other had opened by announcing his floor. I could see her deciding that these country people negotiate like wild animals. Jiang Peng patted his chest and said we are brothers, and that if his Hyung has meat to eat, he will never leave him without a sip of the soup. He had already decided that even at a 50% discount he would not care, since at worst it constrains his divine kingdom in the short term. If I become a god later, he can open a grain shop in Yongwol community the way his father did, and reaching the middle class stops being a dream. I told him there was no need for a discount, and that the grain he grows should stay in his own divine kingdom. The truth is I have no use for the meager resources in there, and taking him as a subordinate god was never a transaction. I simply wanted my best friend covered. He asked, stunned, whether that was really all right. I told him seriously that if he ever manages to grow spirit rice or crops that raise the aptitude of believers, he can sell those to me then. My divine kingdom is developing well enough that I do not need to bleed him. I took his right hand, connected my consciousness to his divine kingdom, and said we would run the process. The contract spoke itself out between us. God Yang Biom and God Jiang Pang sign a subordinate God contract under which troops must be sent to support whichever party's divine kingdom is invaded, with no other requirements attached. God Yang Biom agrees. God Jiang Pang agrees. A force of rules settled into both divine kingdoms, and I felt a one-way passage open between his and mine, wide enough to station troops there whenever I chose. He nearly cried, calling me Godfather again and saying I was too good to him. I told him to get lost, finish eating, and hurry back to class, since my house has no spare virtual helmet for him. He agreed, and added that contract or no contract, if Yang Hyung needs anything, he only has to say the word. His divine kingdom produces 100,000 tons of grain a year, plus a run of C-rank and D-rank spirit plants. After he left, Na Yu looked at me with something in her eyes I could not name. I asked why she was looking at me like that, and she said she was surprised by what I had done. I told her I used to bum meals at his house as a kid, so this was just helping a friend, and his resources had never counted for much with me. She shook her head and said I simply seemed different from what she had thought. A man willing to sign that contract for a friend did not look like a profit-seeking creature to her. For the first time, a sliver of trust appeared. Maybe I was not a scumbag who preyed on the desperate, and maybe there had been a reason behind demanding those assets. After that, my life settled into a rhythm. Class, then the Genius Exchange Group, then the God Forum, then paying the public grain at night, then a look through the Divine Kingdom before sleep. Na Myunghyun had barely spoken since Na Bing put her boot on him. I posted every question I had straight into the channel, whatever anyone thought of my ignorance, and being shameless about learning proved extremely profitable in information. 10 days passed in reality, which is 100 years inside my divine kingdom. Fed on blood pills and Teyaz meat, the believer population had been slowly recovering, and several more Tier 1 beings had come up out of the ranks. The panel now read 14 Tier 1 beings and 100,000 mortals. The population will keep climbing, and every bit of that is a function of time, the one commodity I own in surplus. Then somebody in the Genius Exchange Group dropped a piece of news worth reading twice. The war against the alien gods on the front line had turned extremely fierce, and demand for the healing medicine top-quality hemostatic powder was enormous. That medicine requires a D-rank spirit plant called the blood-condensing flower, which made it profitable in the short term. Somebody asked Lee Hyung where the news came from and what the rate of return looked like, and he said his grandfather's senior brother on the front line had told him. Even children of great families hunt investments constantly, because nobody ever has enough faith points. He kept going. The blood-condensing flower is simple to cultivate and needs nothing but fertile soil, its only real cost being a cycle of 200 years inside a divine kingdom. His grandfather believed the shortage would not be filled inside a year. Plant it once and you harvest at least double your capital and excess profit. High return and low risk. Worth trying. My expression went serious. A crop that grows itself and takes forever. Somebody wrote that listing specifically for me and did not know it. I went straight to the mall. Blood-condensing flower seeds sold in lots of 10,000 for 100,000 faith points. The merchant's note said the flower is simple to sow but needs abundant sunlight and water, so planting density has to be extremely sparse. It requires large-scale reclamation of farmland with a maturity cycle of 200 years inside a divine kingdom. Mature blood-condensing flower sold at 10,000 plants for 300,000 faith points, D-rank spirit plant, currently restocking. That bought most of my remaining doubt. 200 days in reality at a profit rate of 200%, and with my tenfold evolution talent riding on top, I need 20 days to close a full round. Handled properly, I can make a genuine fortune off this war. Another message came in while I was reading. Somebody had checked and thought the news was probably true, but felt 200 days was still too long, and the reclamation of wasteland too troublesome. Somebody agreed, saying a small investment is pointless while a large one risks severe damage to a divine kingdom's ecology. A third had ordered seeds already and planned to hand them to his subordinate god, taking 90% of the profit while the vassal still made money. A fourth regretted that his own subordinate god works in animal husbandry and forging. The topic sparked for a while and then cooled, killed by the growth cycle and the reclamation work. I left the channel for the God Forum, digging through every post on top-quality hemostatic powder and the blood-condensing flower. Once several independent sources lined up, I dumped 40 million faith points into it, buying a first tranche of 4 million seeds. I loaded the resource card into my divine kingdom and issued a divine oracle. I told my believers that for the coming period, every adult male was to be sent out to reclaim all suitable flat land into farmland and then plant the blood-condensing flower seeds. The flower requires abundant sunlight and water and grows to a huge volume, so no two seeds were to be planted closer than 10 meters apart. They answered that they obeyed the divine oracle, and even without understanding what their god was doing, they would never refuse. Not all of my territory is farmable. Between forests, mountains, oceans, and river basins, and because I had never developed along the planting direction, the reclaimed fields came out badly scattered. Nearly 100,000 believers took several years to clear enough ground for 4 million seeds, a full 50,000 square kilometers. Standing over it, I could only sigh. I had thought 1 million square kilometers was enormous, and it turns out it is not enough. As a god, I know roughly how much arable ground my divine kingdom holds, and if I let the believers keep reclaiming, they can clear another 50,000 square kilometers at the absolute most. That caps a single sowing at 8 million blood-condensing flower seeds, which means 80 million faith points of capital on the table. 20 days pass in the real world under the evolution talent, and the ledger closes at 240 million in revenue against 160 million in gross profit. For a divine creature, profiteering is too mild a word for that spread. I am about to be rich, and the arithmetic makes me lightheaded. My new status bought this, because a tier 2 genius of the Na family sits in the genius exchange group. Ordinary divine creatures never hear a market before it moves. I caught the wind, then put my face back into its usual bored shape. After planting the blood-condensing flower, I issue a divine oracle, and set my believers to breaking the rest of the arable land. 3 days out here buys 30 years inside, so the farmland spreads fast enough to rewrite the ecosystem. Those plains held the best soil and the deepest water, the natural range for antelope and wild horses and cattle. My investment pushes every one of them off their ground, and where the refugees crowd in, a settled balance collapses into die-offs. I do not care, because against profits like these, a little ecological damage does not register. Balance is something I can buy back later with outside resources, so long as my believers are not the ones dying in heaps. The rest is livestock on a balance sheet. My only regret is the cultivated area, still too small, and if the terrain allowed it, I would fill in the rivers. Greed makes the snake try to swallow the elephant, and a man should only eat what he can chew. I breathe out and remind myself to be content. For the next several days, I keep my head low, listening in class and joining as many activities as an unremarkable student would. 20 more days go by. I step into the divine kingdom and collect all 4 million blood-condensing flowers, along with the moonlight dew and yang essence the wells and springs produced, and put the whole lot on the network. The blood-condensing flower is exactly the hot commodity the group promised. The listings stripped bare as fast as I post them. Dodo Network reports the sales one after another. The blood-condensing flowers clear out entirely for 120 million. 20 drops of moonlight dew go for 20,000. 50 drops of yang essence for 50,000. And more lines follow. Inside a quarter of an hour, everything is sold, at a final tally of 144 million faith points. After the 10% personal income tax and the 2% platform transaction fee, 126.7 million settles into my divine kingdom. The number is enormous to me and beneath notice on the platform itself. Mall transactions run entirely through Intelligent Life, with no human hand in the chain, and the federal privacy statutes on top. The handful of people who could pull my account activity have no reason to care, and everyone with a reason cannot get near it. Taxes are unavoidable, but for the overwhelming majority, the trading floor is fair. No official stamp opens a shop, no permission is required to sell anything, and with Intelligent Life running the market, commerce grew wild and free on its own. With that much banked, I buy 8 million more blood-condensing flower seeds and fill every strip of farmland. The panel lists me as Divine Lord Yang BM. Divine Kingdom area 1 million square kilometers. Talent shown as F-rank resource talent, with all resources growing 10% faster. Under that sits the SSS-Rank evolution talent. Unique, able to accelerate Divine Kingdom evolution. Already hidden, believers stand at 34 Tier 1 beings and 250,000 mortals. On file are the Federal Body Refining Technique, the Muscle and Tendon Strengthening and Marrow Cleansing Technique, and the Myriad Spirits Return to Origin Array at Minor Mastery. Faith points read 53.42 million and provide 7.5 a day. Buildings come to 400 Moonwells, 400 Sun Springs in 1 B-rank Baekryong Blood Pool. Assets run from 8 million blood-condensing flower seedlings at D-rank Spirit Plant down to 1,000 pieces of 1,000-year soul-nourishing wood at C-rank. Since the planting, my believers only patrol to keep other creatures out of the fields, which leaves the rest of their hours for cultivation and children. Population and Tier 1 numbers both climb steadily. They eat more meat every year under the muscle and tendon strengthening and marrow cleansing technique, yet 5 adult Tazy and a steady output of blood pills keep the tables full. 2 centuries should have produced a larger population, and density is the reason it did not. The more of them there are, the tighter the living space gets, and cultivation gives a person the constant sensation of growing stronger, which quietly kills the appetite for children. Outside the tribe, every flat surface is under blood-condensing flower. So instead of founding new settlements, they pack into 5 main cities. I am not anxious. A larger population raises the odds of a genius being born, but with the evolution talent 250,000 is enough for now. Human development comes down to survival of the fittest anyway. Those with better talent live longer and leave more children behind, and across enough generations that pressure favors the whole civilization. Set against a population alone, the income from the blood-condensing flower matters more. On the other side of the ledger, the blood pills push my Tier 1 count up sharply across 200 years, and still no Tier 2 being has appeared. Talking with the family geniuses told me why. Those descendants all buy pills produced in cultivation divine kingdoms. One pill strengthens the muscles, cleanses the marrow, and lifts a believer's aptitude by a real margin, at a price exactly as ugly as that sounds. Measured against those, the blood pills my Bay Creon blood pool turns out in batches are plentiful and thin. I am not anxious about this either, because capital still has to go into the divine kingdom first. Sharpening the knife does not delay the wood chopping. With enough resources plus the evolution talent, passing everyone is only a question of when. Those weeks in the exchange group changed how I understand divine kingdom development. I used to think about ecological stability, biodiversity, sustainable growth, and self-sufficiency, like a careful farmer. The geniuses walk a different road entirely. Spare land goes to spirit plants, water to spirit beasts, mountains and open sky to monster beasts. All of it sold for faith points on a schedule, with no thought spared for the ecology. The proceeds go straight into cultivating their believers, because strength always ranks first. Ecological balance collapses. Buy resources and dump them in, and as long as the beasts do not starve, it is fine. Low-level monster beasts dying by the thousand. Poor adaptability, so replace them with a hardier batch at a reasonable price. Spirit plants catching disease? Dump them cheap. Buy different seeds and stop wasting believers' hours on a losing crop. Every resource serves the strength of the believers, and nothing else is sacred. The deeper I get, the clearer it is that the wealthy play a different game. They carry no survival worries, their families hand them monthly subsidies, every one earned inside their divine kingdoms is pure gain, and 99% of their attention goes into making their believers stronger. The families that own gods monopolize trade routes and hold the information advantage, which is how they harvest at that scale. Their descendants ride their elders' support into becoming the next generation of gods, and it is always the ordinary divine creatures who get harvested. None of this makes me indignant, because the strong use the rules rather than break them. The so-called heretics who want to overthrow the privileged class are opportunists hunting a shortcut. If they win, they become the new privileged class, and if they lose, the corpses belong to people who followed a crowd without thinking. As a Tier 2 genius of the Na family, I am inside the system rather than under it. So I put my divine kingdom on a clearance sale. 100,000 Bodhi treasure snakes, 50,000 Dark Knight vultures, 200,000 spiritfish babies, 80,000 daybung birds, 80,000 peregrine falcons, water lotus seeds, and 1,000 pieces of 1,000-year soul-nourishing wood go onto the block with them. The ecology stops being my concern, replaced by the growth rate of my assets. With the Bodhi treasure snakes, I calculate the density around Snake Valley that yields the fastest reproduction against the available food. Then cull to that line. Once those low-level demonic beasts drop far enough, the pressure across the divine kingdom eases. Then I spend another 60 million faith points on 100 more moon wells and sun springs each, leaving only emergency funds. Business done, I drop into the virtual world and send Jiang Peng a location invitation. Modern people spend nearly every waking hour in here, and it really is more interesting than reality. He arrives within a few breaths and drops into an act of worship, calling me his Lord Main God and asking why this lowly one has been summoned. The nicknames this idiot invents multiply faster than my faith points do. I tell him to talk business, because I know of a divine kingdom investment with high returns and low risk, and he and Uncle Jiang should both look at it. His face lights up, since the information I reach now is above his own. The easiest money in this world has always been information asymmetry. I tell him it is the blood-condensing flower, and to search it himself and take it home to his father. The excess profits will hold for roughly a year, which is 2 or 3 crops if he moves. He nods without hearing me, his attention already inside the mall. A moment later, he is swearing at the margins, and he logs out and drags Jiang Man-san out with him. He asks whether they should plant the blood-condensing flower, because a rate of return like that is difficult to believe. Anyone but his Yang Hyung saying it would have been a scam. Jiang Man-san takes a long breath and says he saw a few words on the God forum, and that it feeds high-grade hemostatic powder. Those are frontline supplies, he adds, so the war against the alien races must not be going well. Jiang Peng asks if that makes this war profiteering, and his father says that is exactly what it is. Then he asks how Yang Hyung came by information that important, and Jiang Man-sen reminds him his friend is a Na family genius, so many sources are only normal. Jiang Peng asks whether they should really cultivate it. His father slams the table and asks why anyone refuses an investment that amounts to picking money off the ground. He will mortgage the house and the grain shop and take high-interest loans on top. And after this deal, they buy a place in the county center. Greed sits plainly in the old man's eyes. Jiang Peng asks whether going that large carries risk, because a high school senior cannot read a situation like this. His father asks what he thinks he knows, and demands to know how ordinary people climb without taking risks. Then Jiang Mansan asks how much of the profit they are giving little Yang for the tip. Jiang Peng has to admit, "I never said," and the silence after that goes on for a while. Na Yu went out with her mother-in-law this morning, and gets back at noon. I feel the door open and log out of the virtual world to meet her. She is in good condition today, with a smile she is not hiding. The steady supply of water of life has worked visibly on the gauntness she carried when she first moved in. I stand, take her right hand, and transfer this month's 5 million faith points. She does not refuse this time. Instead, she looks up seriously and tells me she went to the hospital for a checkup, and that it is a boy. I am stunned, and what rises in me sits between joy and something sadder I cannot name. A divine creature's theoretical lifespan is 500 years, and plenty wait until past 100 or 200 before having children. At 20-something, I have married and fathered a son early by any measure here. By the time the boy is grown, he could call me Hyung. Na Yu puts her arms around me and asks what would make a good name for our child. Somewhere in these weeks, she decided I am not the disaster she assumed she was marrying. I tell her I have no talent for names, and she should decide. She makes a soft sound of agreement, then says her grandfather wants me in the virtual world, and has already sent the address. I tell her to rest, and that if the faith points run short, she only has to say so. She is pregnant, so the water of life cannot be cut back at all, not with the fetus to think about. She tells me to rest assured, since she knows what she is doing. Na Seongpung is a first-order god, and I am not about to make him wait. I tap the coordinates and my consciousness is seized by an enormous suction, crossing space into a distant stretch of starry sky. The first thing that reaches me is the smell of blood, thick enough to be a weight. This is a divine kingdom war. My consciousness hangs hundreds of thousands of meters up, and I still feel every detail on the ground below. A goblin a full 100 meters tall swings a giant axe and roars, and in front of it, a human stands on a flying sword. Sword light flashes once, the goblin's head leaves its shoulders, and the body goes down like a landslide. Cultivation path, and I cannot tell whether that believer is at Foundation Establishment or Golden Core. This one person could sweep my entire divine kingdom flat without hurrying. Behind me, Na Seongpung's voice says that little Yang has arrived. What I saw today is a drop out of an ocean, and still enough to show me what gods are. He explains that we are inside the divine kingdom of a goblin demigod, where he represents the Na family on a reclamation campaign. The small-scale conflict is won, and this is the cleanup, and the place will become a resource point for the Na family. Once I break through to demigod, I will stand at this level naturally. He is in a very good mood, and the campaign is not the only reason, since the news about his granddaughter has reached him. He says nothing here needs my attention and takes my right hand, and our figures cross space into a pavilion at a frontline supply point. He pours my tea and remarks that you and I were quite fast about it. Since she is pregnant, he says, restraint is expected of us from here on, and if I harm his little great-grandchild, he will not let me off. I look at the table and tell him I understand. He tells me he has been too busy to guide my divine kingdom, and asks whether I have run into problems. I tell him development is going well with the Na family's resources behind it. He asks whether I have settled on a path, and I let my expression go conflicted and say I am still caught between cultivation and martial arts. That is not entirely true. After this study, I know both roads draw strength from the followers themselves, and the only real fork is whether to temper the body or open the danjion. My opinions on that stay behind my teeth. He nods and lays it out. Once I become a demigod, I enter the Divine Kingdom simulation battle. Some matches against alien races and some internal, and only real power protects a man there. The cultivation path, he says, resembles the immortal cultivation stories in old books. Its followers coordinate better, it suits large formations, and it leans offensive. The martial arts path builds physical bodies, leans defensive, and raises survivability by a wide margin. The first demands endless methods for spiritual roots and a mountain of heavenly treasures. The second takes longer to temper flesh, and both carry costs. I thank him for the guidance. He tells me to let the followers choose for themselves, because which path suits a divine kingdom may have been decided the day it awakened. His instruction is to buy a transmission tower and load it with beginner methods from both roads, and over time, the right direction becomes obvious. Then he says he has prepared resources for me, nothing of great value, but comprehensive enough to last until demigod. He sets 2 cards down on the table. A glance shows dozens of techniques, movement arts, and combat skills, a full set for each road. None of it is cheap in the mall, and he hands over this many without blinking. A powerful god really is generous with his descendants. I thank him again and mean it, because every one I have is committed to Divine Kingdom investment. My followers now develop far faster than they had any right to. He cannot repair Yu's Divine Kingdom, he says, and can only do his best to stretch her lifespan. His great-grandchild links us now, so he will treat me as his own grandson, and that is only what he ought to do. The third year of high school is the critical window, and every resource and hour of mine belongs in my own Divine Kingdom. I should stop worrying about Yu's water of life, since this reclamation campaign has paid him well. So Na Yu told him about the transfers. Between the pregnancy and whatever he decided about my character, the old man has quietly increased his position in me. Then he tells me to enter the Divine Kingdom simulation battle when I have time. With my showing in the school competition, the top 1,000 of the family ranking should be simple. And he asks why I have never participated. I know what it is, since the federal government listed as its own section, but my hours have gone into investment. Between classes and the exchange group, my consciousness has sat over the blood-condensing flower fields, sending divine oracles to have my followers hunt the surrounding monsters. A D-rank spirit plant pulls beasts in from every direction, and I was not letting my money crop be trampled. Seeing my blank face, he explains. The Divine Kingdom simulation battle is run by the federal government's highest intelligent life. A divine creature may field 10,000 the followers fight through consciousness projection, and a total wipe costs nothing. It hones overall combat ability, he says, and the Na family attaches ranking rewards on top. Then he tells me my background is ordinary and my access to information naturally weaker than my peers. I should talk to them constantly, because only a fool develops in isolation. I promise to start studying it at once. He tells me to leave him a message in the virtual world if I hit something I cannot solve. Back in reality, I manifest the 2 inheritance cards. The first offers the 5 elements cultivation technique, with the light body art as movement, and the green origin sword art, the clarity needle technique, and the concentration technique among the combat skills. They are prerequisite C-rank methods for the cultivation path, sold as a complete set at 50 million faith points, recommended for use with a C-rank transmission tower. The second offers the Vajra indestructible technique at C-rank, with the mountain shaking fist and the iron arm technique behind it. Those are prerequisite methods for the martial arts path. Again, a complete set at 50 million with the same tower recommendation. 100 million faith points of inheritance, handed across a tea table. Only a god of Na Xiongpeng's weight produces that without a flicker, and buying these myself would have meant circling the listings for a month. I open them all and search for the C-rank transmission tower. It holds 100 techniques and martial arts skills at C-rank or below, at 150,000 faith points. The merchant note is a small masterpiece of honesty. It states flatly that the building has no investment value, and that unlike inheritance from a divine oracle, it lets followers choose their path. Once sold, no returns are accepted, ordinary people are not advised to buy, and customer service has been handed to an intelligent life that refuses refunds too. I laugh out loud reading it. 150,000 faith points is a serious commitment for an ordinary household, and this class of building produces nothing, so nobody outside wealthy family heirs would ever buy one. No wonder the merchant fired his own customer service, worn to bone by buyers begging to undo the purchase. None of which is my problem, because 150,000 means nothing to me now. I buy 5 transmission towers, deploy them into the major cities, and load both sets of legacies. My divine oracle tells every believer they may study the methods inside and choose the path they are best suited to cultivate. My believers are people with individual strengths and limits, and over a long horizon letting them pick beats enlightenment by decree. As for the route my divine kingdom takes, I settled that long ago. It will be both. And the god form told me I am not the first god to think so. Picture cultivators who fly through the sky and burrow through earth with unmatched defense, beside martial artists who have made saints of their own bodies. An army like that would be flatly invincible among its peers. The catch is that such a choice eats far more time and resources, and development that's slow gets a god left behind. Except that I am not other gods. With the evolution talent, time is the cheapest thing I own, which makes comprehensive development obvious rather than reckless. Some things are better done quietly, so I say none of this out loud. By the time I finish, believers crowd the towers picking methods, and some switch their cultivation outright. There are people on the 5 elements cultivation technique, and I feel the ratio immediately. Far more lean toward the 5 elements, which tells me my divine kingdom suits the path of cultivation better. That does not bother me, because a population this size always throws out martial arts prodigies, and I have ambitions past both roads. If I break through to demigod with enough area and population, I might build a nation centered on machinery. A mechanical path that keeps pace with cultivation and martial arts cannot be simple, and the proof is that the entire virtual world runs on the intelligent life of the mechanical divine kingdom. The investment it demands dwarfs either of the other roads, and the fragments people drop on the God Forum tell me I have no qualifications yet. So I file it and go research the Divine Kingdom simulation battle. Life has been full lately and the group almost never brings the simulation battle up, so without Na Xiongpeng's reminder I would not have gone near it for months. I tap into the section and it reports Federal Citizen Yang Biome, Divine Creature, current points 0, current win rate 0. It offers to expand the Yang County Divine Creature ranking, and I take it. Number 1 is Li Myung-wan at 64,624 points and 64.2%. Number 2 is Yang Wonho at 63,122 points and 63.4%. And the list runs on. I scroll without recognizing a single name, down to number 10,000 at 10,240 points and 51.1%. I have supposedly worked into the inner circle of Yang County's geniuses, so how do I not know one person on a list 10,000 deep? Forget me, where are Na Bing and Li Chonhang? The only explanation is that they have not participated either. Being willing to ask is a virtue, so I put the question to the Genius Exchange group. I just looked at the Divine Kingdom simulation battle and cannot find any of their names, with a little dog head attached for self-preservation. The replies arrive instantly, and every one of them is some flavor of alarm. A dozen messages call me bold, call me a chatterbox, and point out that this is not a question to ask in a group. One jokes that anyone who knew me less would assume I was mocking both group owners, and several tell me to retract it before somebody takes offense. I stare at the wall of them and pull the message back. Lee Suho messages privately to tell me what I said is far too easy to misread, then asks for my coordinates. He teleports over the moment I send them and asks why I'm poking at the Divine Kingdom simulation battle. I tell him I was curious, since Na Bing and Li Chonhang are both monsters and neither is on the board. He asks whether I know how large Yang County's population is, then answers himself, no less than 1 billion people with 90% of them divine creatures. Our divine kingdoms have not been awake 6 months, he says, while some divine creatures out there have lived over 400 years. We are geniuses, true, but genius still needs time to compound, and the divine kingdoms of those old fogies have evolved for thousands of generations. I take that with an awkward face, because he is right. I have been so deep in conversation with talented classmates that I forgot how small and young this circle is. We are 20 years old and our divine kingdoms have not run a full year. He goes on. In the entire history of Yang County First High School, very few students have cracked the top 10,000, and it takes years for such a monster to appear. Anyone who manages it takes the special admission route straight into one of the Federation's 2 top universities. Then he says a friend told him Na Bing is working toward exactly that, and asks whether I understand that blurting my question into the group collects enemies. He complains at length, unable to decide whether my problem is low emotional intelligence or low intelligence. I type a line saying I am inexperienced, meant no harm, and asking the experts not to hold it against me. That is when Na Myung-hyun surfaces. He calls me a country bumpkin and tells me not to embarrass his Na family. Then he informs the group that my name appears nowhere in the top 1,000 of the family's internal ranking, and finishes by calling me trash. My temper is good, and my face still goes cold. This is not sarcasm, and I decide he can wait for it. Lee Suho tells me to ignore the idiot. A friend of his says Na Myung-hyun has little talent, survives on his parents' unlimited support, and sits at the bottom of the Na family's tier 2 geniuses. He is the real trash, Lee Suho says with some heat. I tell him it is fine. He adds that the major companies all keep detailed information on the Divine Kingdom simulation battle, using it for internal rankings to push their young people. The rewards are substantial, and I should look into it. When he asks whether I want to come to Heavenly Fragrance World for a get-together, I say I am not in the mood. My consciousness reappears at the Na family station in the virtual world, where I ask John Unso what he knows about the family's internal Divine Kingdom simulation battle. He raises a hand and a display screen unfolds with the leaderboard on it. First place is Master Na Hoon, Tier 1 Genius, 1,420 points at a 74% win rate. Second is Na Bing, Tier 1 Genius, 135 points at 82%, a win rate that shows how carefully she picks her fights. 142nd is Na Myung-hyun, Tier 2 Genius, 542 points at 71%. 2041st is Na Wan, Tier 3 Genius, 121 points at 64%. Directly under him at 2042nd sits Yang Biome, Tier 2 Genius, 0 points, 0%. Jeon Unso explains that the board only tracks students who have not graduated, and that beyond Yang County, there are Na Family Geniuses 212 Tier 2 Geniuses, and 1,828 Tier 3 Geniuses. Once a student graduates, he says, they drop out of the statistics even as a divine creature. The Na family attaches reward scaling for every 100 places advanced, from 100,000 faith points at the bottom to 10 billion for first. He suggests young Master Yang participate often before graduating. because the top 100 would be a considerable income. He is only a guest elder, and without the subsidy he would never nursemaid a high school student. His own investments demand constant attention, so unless I ask outright he volunteers nothing. He handed me his development experience because he came up a commoner, exactly like me. Of course, without a talented outsider's value, the Ney family would never have assigned a guest elder to me at all. Low subsidy, low effort, cost control all the way down, because a live-in son-in-law is still an outsider when the accounting is done. I have no idea other guides are far more diligent, and knowing it would change nothing, having a demigod I can consult at any hour already beats my starting hand. One must learn to be content. The reward structure justifies the relationship. The top 2,000 pays 100,000 faith points, 1900th pays 500,000, and 1000th pays 10 million. The top 100 pays 100 million. The top 10 pays 1 billion. The 100 million for the top 100 looks reachable, and the 1 billion for the top 10 is something I expect to collect before the college entrance examination. Back in reality, my consciousness drops in and a divine oracle selects the 10,000 strongest individuals out of the 5 major cities. The cultivation legacies have not been in place long enough for many to absorb them. A great many, though, have already reached minor mastery in the muscle and tendon strengthening and marrow cleansing technique I loaded earlier. Setting aside the 34 Tier 1 beings, the remaining mortals carry bodies twice as strong as at the school assessment. This elite 10,000 against the 50,000 I fielded back then would be a slaughter. Armored, helmeted, and armed, they stand ready, and when I connect their consciousnesses descend into the simulation battle space. The system confirms a divine creature with 10,000 believers, and asks whether I wish to begin matchmaking. I tell it to start. Their bodies still sit cross-legged in the divine kingdom, and only their minds are here, so even total annihilation costs me nothing. Matchmaking weighs win rate and points across every human population in the federal government, and only rankings are split by region. The god across from me could be in Yang County, in the city, or on another planet. Matchmaking completes, the scenario randomizes into forest, and the battle commences. My soldiers appear under towering trees, and 1,000 meters ahead stand several hundred barbarians who are not even wearing clothes. I complain internally about whatever mechanism calls this a fair pairing, because the man across from me clearly awakened his divine kingdom this week. I wave a hand, one Tier 1 being takes a dozen people forward, and it is over in the time it takes to walk there. The system reports all enemy believers dead, 1 point, and a 100% win rate. I continue. The scenario generates as Gobi Desert, and 2 points follow. 30 straight matches go by like that, my soldiers handling every one without strain. Then matchmaking pairs me into a volcano, and the moment the scene resolves, I feel the heat radiating off the ground even from the void, with my believers already sweating through their armor. High-level intelligent life really does build a convincing world, down to restoring every soldier to peak condition when a battle begins. This opponent is a different animal. All 10,000 of his are mortals, but every weapon throws back cold light, and my face twitches at a complete set of F-rank gear across an entire army. Whichever wealthy family this is, they drop 200 or 300 million faith points dressing these people. My soldiers are stronger, but weapons swing a battle hard this early, and carelessness would capsize me in a gutter. The 2 armies charge and the ringing of metal does not stop. His people know nothing about formations, so every clash costs him more than me, and my army cuts down the last of them. Victory returns 40 points, putting me at 70 with the win rate still perfect. I keep going. My fallen soldiers condense again. The lost weapons return to their hands, and everyone stands at peak state as the next scenario, city, begins. This opponent has Tier 1 beings, and yet his equipment is plain iron, so the pressure is lower than the last fight. As matchmaking rolls on with my win rate pinned at 100%, the opponents sharpen noticeably, and each victory pays dozens of points at a time. The counter reads 362 when it asks again, and my answer is firm. The scenario generates as grassland, and one look at the enemy line pulls my expression flat. 2 Tier 2 beings, 100 Tier 1 beings, and the same full F-rank kit the rich boy had. Better soldiers and better gear at once is an unpleasant equation. There is no surrender here, and dying costs nothing anyway, so I bite down and fight. Meeting this squad during the first high school examination would have sent my army running. Shield bearers forward, flanking left and right, archers preparing, in order to hold the line against a vanguard that threatens to break it, then spears raised and thrown. My unit has drilled the myriad spirits return to origin array for generations, and the coordination shows in what each clash costs me. The results run far better than I expected, and I deliberately declined to send down a divine oracle. Under the evolution talent, the generals in the eyes of the formation understand that array no worse than I do. I have no interest in being the commander who exhausts his own army by meddling. On the other side, in a luxury villa on a distant planet, a man in a virtual reality headset sweats through a fight he expected to walk. He thought this was a free win, and cannot understand where a divine creature at my point level got that depth of understanding, and the myriad spirits return to origin array. The armies grind each other down from 9,000 to 6,000 to 3,000 to 500. In the last exchange, the gap in weapons and raw strength tells, and my line breaks and falls. The system reports the battle failed. Points reduced by 1 to 361. Win rate 97.2%. I tell it no and exit the virtual world. The Ney family board now lists me at rank 324, 361 points, 97.2%, and the number stirs nothing much in me. With F-rank weapons on every soldier, beating the man I just lost to would have been simple. The run gave me an honest map of my strengths and weaknesses. My believers understand formations far better than any of my peers can manage. Because I spent almost nothing on treasures to lift their aptitude, their raw strength still sits below the great family's geniuses. Weapons matter just as much this early. I am still not willing to sink hundreds of millions of faith points into equipment, because far too many other places need that money. What the run did pay is real. My ranking jumped from 2,000th to just over 300th, and nearly 100 million faith points transferred automatically out of the Na family's public account into my divine kingdom. Past the top 1,000, every 100 places advanced pays more than 10 million on its own. Money from prominent families really is the easiest money to earn. The panel now reads 112.67 million faith points, with 8.1 provided daily. I sit with the number, deciding what the most efficient use of abundant funds is. My wristwatch starts beeping without pause. Lee Suho fires message after message, calling me Old Yang and telling me that Trash Na Myungyan is running his mouth again in the Genius Exchange group. I frown, and something cold moves behind it. Inside the group, Na Myungyan is laughing himself sick. He thought I had talent, and assumed a man who took that much investment from his Na family would advance by leaps, and instead I have 300-something points. He adds that without the live-in son-in-law arrangement I would barely qualify as a Tier 3 genius, then suggests the group needs stricter screening so that just anyone cannot wander in. Of the 100-plus members, only he is talking. The rest are not fools, and whether they agree or think he has gone too far, nobody puts a name on a quarrel that does not concern them. I send one line telling him we have no deep grudges and he should not provoke me. He answers that he was starting to think I had no temper at all, then asks what I intend to do about it. Then he challenges me to apply for a Divine Kingdom simulation battle and settle it properly. He swears that failing to wipe out every believer I own means giving up the surname Na. Watching him work himself into the full second-generation rich kid performance, I close the chat group, rather than feed him. On his end, the silence only makes him more contemptuous. He spits that a bumpkin dared to steal his woman, and promises that once I graduate university he will send troops to raid my divine kingdom. Without federal law protecting students' divine kingdoms, my coordinates would already be pulled. I take a long breath and decide these faith points are not going into fixed assets this round. My believers need to be stronger first. Na Myunghyun has taught me one useful thing, which is that staying low-key forever only teaches people they can walk on you. I open the store and pull up the pill I have read a dozen times. One marrow cleansing pill sells for 10,000 faith points, comes out of a third-order God's cultivation divine kingdom, and significantly improves the aptitude of mortal believers. The merchant note warns that the first dose is by far the most effective, that later doses fall off sharply, and that continuous consumption is not recommended. Cheel Pun of the Blacksmith Association recommended it in the group, and a fair number backed him up. I breathe out and go large, spending 100 million faith points on 10,000 marrow cleansing pills. My elite 10,000 are the strongest and most gifted people my divine kingdom holds, which makes them the correct target for those pills. If their strength rises enough to reach the top 100 of the Na family board, another 100 million comes back. So I take the gamble. Even if the top 100 stays out of reach, my rank has to clear Na Myungyan's, because listening to that fly every day has become tiresome. The pills arrive, I load them into the divine kingdom, and a divine oracle instructs the 10,000 who fought today to take them. Under my attention, their bodies begin to convulse. Their skin splits and weeps thin lines of blood, and their bones make sounds bones should not make. It looks like torture from the outside. As a god, though, I feel their aptitude changing fast enough to watch, and the worse the original talent, the more violently the pill improves it. The gain across this group is at least tenfold. That single fact explains something that has bothered me for weeks. Now I understand exactly how Na Bing had already birthed a Tier 3 being by the first high school grand examination. Because she bought it. A full month passes inside before the soldiers surface from the medicinal power, a few breaths from where I sit. I issue another divine oracle telling them the pill has raised their aptitude permanently and that diligent cultivation is expected. They also hold first claim among the clan's women in producing the next generation, so their children inherit the better talent. They answer that they obey the command of their god, flushed and fervid to a man. With the SSS-Rank talent, one day out here is 10 years in there. The next afternoon a warm current floods my limbs, and I know that sensation because it means Tier 2 beings have appeared. Once the change passes, I go in and look. 2 Tier 2 beings have risen out of the pill takers, and behind them more than 100 new Tier 1 beings. 10 years of high aptitude compounding is an explosion rather than a curve. Their children are visibly sturdier than other infants, which is the return on that divine oracle arriving early. Then the new problem announces itself, because taste, meat, and blood pills are being consumed far too fast. It is not only the pill takers, since all those cultivation techniques and martial arts enlarge the appetite of ordinary believers too. Meat that used to feed 5 now barely satisfies 1, and the believers cultivating the Vajra indestructible technique are bottomless. Supply holds for the moment. Any further climb in strength or population breaks it. Worse, the quality of Tazi meat no longer matches what my believers have become. They spend longer at the table, over 2 hours a day, just to sustain what cultivation burns, with time in the latrines rising to match. Higher quality food has stopped being an optimization and become a requirement. I open the mall and go looking. The automatic concentrator is a special building from the mechanical divine kingdom of a Tier 5 god, capable of dramatically concentrating the nutrients of low-level meat, priced at 100 million faith points. My eyes light up before I finish the description. The merchant note explains that monster corpses placed inside are decomposed automatically, and the condensed food vacuum-packed with a shelf life of up to 3,000 years. The tip beneath it adds that the unit carries a specialized automatic cutting plant, which converts creatures similar to Teis straight into finished packaged food. The cutting plant adjusts its own footprint and accommodates up to 100 adult Taesi. The seller frames it as ideal for a divine creature's divine kingdom, promising that with one automatic concentrator, a god never worries about food. Aside from the price, the thing was built for me specifically. I do not have the funds today, so it becomes the first purchase the moment either the harvest lands or the top 100 pays out. As my population grows and my believers strengthen, food consumption will climb exponentially, and logistics is a problem I intend to solve once. A dozen days later, every blood-condensing flower matures and I list the harvest. The sale returns 240 million faith points, 211.2 million net of tax, credited straight into the divine kingdom. I buy 8 million blood-condensing flower seeds, the automatic concentrator, and 15 adult Teis in one pass, spending well over half of it. Then my consciousness goes in to place the building, and the footprint is too large to sit inside a main city. I picked the mountain range nearest the cities and shifted aside to make room. It really is a Tier 5 god's work, because it needs no external power. The instant it touches the surface of my divine kingdom, the giant mechanical monster begins to turn. Thousands of tracks haul meat, enormous gravity rods swing without pause, temperatures cycle from searing to freezing, and electric arcs snap across the housings. 100 gyun of food goes in one end and comes out compressed to the size of a palm, then rides the line into packaging and stacks itself in the product area. I feed it the 5 Taisi already here, plus the 15 I just bought, and my expression goes strange watching it work. There is no helping the feeling. On one side stands a city built of piled giant stones, with believers wearing clothes that barely qualify as tailoring. On the other stands a machine out of a future none of them will live to see. The contrast is jarring. It makes me wonder whether the high-energy frozen food my father used to bring home came off a machine like this. I shake the thought loose and pull up the Divine Kingdom's information.